Tell us.
So this detective, Charles Benoit, a hero, Port Authority detectives made many drug arrests. He now has to watch this woman go free. He got her, right, with the goods. He did a good job. He's earning his pay, if more. And then he watches a criminal justice system put her through the turnstiles.
Hey, with any luck, he'll
get
sued for illegal search, too.
Oh, my heavens. Do we know how she answered those 3 questions when she bought the ticket, by the way? That's all I want to know. Did you or anybody you know pack your bag?
To bring on? No, I didn't. Have you had your bags with you at all times? You bet.
You bet I did.
But at 8:47, when we return, I want to bounce this one off of John Gambling as our drive time continues to 11. A California inmate may sue for the right to mail his semen to his wife in hopes of becoming a father.
Won that case in the Ninth Circuit. I did a case almost identical. All the prisoner wants is a clean container and a swift messenger case.
You see what I mean, ladies and gentlemen? A cop does his job, the Port Authority cop there in Newark International Airport. He gets smacked. He gets spanked.
He didn't get smacked or spanked. He didn't even get paddled.
A prisoner in jail has the right to send his sperm vis-a-vis Federal Express.
He's not sending it to you, Curtis. I was
Oh, that's a good point.
1-800-848-WABC.
But it's 8:48. It's time for our traffic and our weather update.
Overnight package for you. Thanks,
Mamma mia.
Curtis and Kuby and Eric. Hey, at the big 300 River Crossings, we're looking at about a 30-minute wait upstairs, 20 below, 45 minutes at the Lincoln. The Holland still a solid 30 with the crash cleared on the Newark Bay extension. Midtown Tunnel, 25. Outbound Gowanus now heading down through Brooklyn at the Prospect. A little pokey with a pileup. That's on your left. Up to the Bronx, northbound at the Deegan at the Cross Bronx. Just the right shoulder getting by from a smash. And also southbound on the Bronx River Parkway at the Cross County and Yonkers, a slam. And this report brought to you by Panasonic, inviting you to experience the brilliance and clarity of high-definition television. But be warned, you'll never be satisfied with regular TV again. HD TV made possible by Panasonic at the Wiz. 11 away from 9 o'clock, I'm Don Pachin. In This Morning for Val, it's Ed Levy. Good morning.
And good morning. It's beautiful out there. Humidity down, and temperature's not going to be too bad. Partly sunny to mostly sunny today. High temperature around 82 degrees, and northwest wind at 5 to 10. Clear tonight, a little bit on the chilly side, 61 for the low. For tomorrow, Wednesday, mostly sunny, a high in the mid-70s, and Thursday, may have a scattered shower late in the day. Otherwise, partly sunny with a high around 74 to 76 degrees. It's currently 64 degrees in Midtown. We have sunny skies. From the Weather Channel, I'm meteorologist Ed Levy on 77 WABC.
And at 8:50, this portion of Curtis and Kuby is brought to you by Continental Airlines.
Let's talk about the whole kit and caboodle. No one knows what it is, but it's come to be synonymous with the whole enchilada and the whole ball of wax, which is exactly what you get when you fly Continental Airlines Business First. What with concierge service, comfy sleeper seats, extraordinary wines and champagnes, undeniably fine dining, and, of course, mouth-watering sundaes. What more could you want? Well, how about a multi-channel personal entertainment system that has a whole shebang full of movies? Whatever a shebang is. That's not just us blowing smoke, either. Condé Nast Traveler awarded Business First Best Transatlantic and Trans-Pacific Business Class among U.S. airlines. Business First was also voted Best Business Class by subscribers to OAG, the official airline guide. And that's just to name a few. So the next time you want to fly the best, now you know Business First is one kid with a whole lot more caboodle. Continental Airlines. Work hard, fly right. For reservations, call your travel agent, Continental Airlines, or ticket online at continental.com.
This is George Weber in the WABC newsroom with a live special report. There has been either an explosion or some kind of accident at the South Tower of the World Trade Center in downtown Manhattan. Thick black smoke is billowing from the building, and there is a gaping hole at about the 100th floor. Firefighters are on the scene. There have been some eyewitness reports that they heard the sound of a plane, and apparently a plane could have crashed into the side of the building. Now, from what it looks like from a distance, it does appear as if something blew out a massive hole on the side of the building. Ron Kuby, you just got to look at that, too. What's it look like to you?
It's hard to tell because the photography shots are far away, but it looks like there's a huge gaping hole ripped in the World Trade Center.
This would have been about the 100th floor, and actually I have a friend who works on the 101st floor of that building, and the way it's looking right now, I mean, there isn't much left of that side of the building.
Well, interesting because right down on Fifth Avenue, we remember, well, not I remember, but in the past years, there was a a plane crash into the Empire State Building.
And that's exactly what people are talking about now, the possibility, because witnesses said it sounded like an airplane, but witnesses also said it sounded like a bomb.
Yeah, we're also getting reports, Metro Traffic is just telling me in my earphones, that it was a plane. They're confirming a plane perhaps did crash into the World Trade Center tower. And again,
all right, so you'll be giving us updates all throughout the John Gambling show.
We will.
Very good.
Hey, you. Want to tour the great landmarks of New York?
Do you go to Mo Ginsburg?
No. We start in Central Park.
Are they having a huge menswear sale? Because Mo Ginsburg is.
No, but maybe you'd like the Bronx Zoo.
I'll bet that's not as wild as the selection of men's suits, sport coats, pants, and shoes at Mo Ginsburg.
How about the Little Italy?
Speaking of imports, Mo Ginsburg has the best selection of designer names at the best prices.
The Empire State Building?
Mo Ginsburg has great stuff for big and tall guys, too.
How's about Wall Street?
With great suits starting at $199 and jackets starting at $149, Mo Ginsburg's stock is really selling.
Whoa! Maybe we will stop at Mo Ginsburg.
It's the most popular attraction in town.
The Mo Ginsburg sale is on now, with men's suits, sport coats, pants, shoes, sportswear, accessories, and more. Expert alterations available. Visit 162 Fifth Avenue at 21st Street and take a tour of the selection and quality that have made Mo Ginsburg a New York landmark.
Charles and Marlise Lehman of Cresco, New Jersey.
My husband Charlie had an angiogram, and then his doctor told us he would need heart bypass and valve replacement surgery. We had so many questions, and we were frightened.
Charlie's doctor recommended the Heart and Vascular Institute of New Jersey at Englewood Hospital and Medical Center.
The doctors and staff at Englewood put our minds at ease right away.
Every single question was answered.
They answered all our questions.
They explained that Charlie had problems with his heart and with his blood vessels, and that they would be able to treat both at the same time.
The surgery was successful. The aftercare in the hospital was amazing, and I was home after just a few days.
Expert heart and vascular care in northern New Jersey. Call 201-894-3636 or visit englewoodhospital.com. Ask about our free seminars. From pioneering bloodless surgery to advancing heart and vascular care, Englewood Hospital and Medical Center, changing the way the world practices medicine.
8:54, and Ron, we'll be getting a network update on what appears to be a plane crash into one of the towers of the World Trade Center. And, you know, ironically, I was just speaking about Sheikh Omar Abdel Rahman.
Now, don't. Just relax. So far, all they're confirming is it's an airplane.
I'm just asking you, because if anybody would know. Ron, you have represented...
Well, I have some thoughts on it, but I think I'll save those thoughts until after we go live to the network, find out the latest breaking news about this horrific accident, at least what people hope is an accident and not an intentional act.
This is a special report from ABC News. An airplane apparently has crashed into the upper levels of the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan in New York. A tremendous amount of smoke is pouring from one of the twin towers of the World Trade Center. There appears to be a gaping hole about a quarter of the way down from the top of the World Trade Center. We have an eyewitness who saw what happened, Joan Fleischer.
I heard the plane very close to the top of the buildings. I looked outside, and I saw it hit, and it exploded immediately.
The plane exploded with a great deal of smoke. We're seeing a better picture now of the World Trade Center, one of the twin towers. There are, of course, two of them. A gaping hole in the upper levels of the World Trade Center. Flame and smoke pouring from the top of that building. No word yet on casualties. This just happened moments ago. A plane crash in the top of the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan in New York. I'm Jim Hickey. This has been a special report from ABC News.
And this is Babita Hariani. We'll have more information on this breaking story coming up shortly. Now back to Eric Hastings.
I did it in 3 minutes a day.
I did it in 3 minutes a day.
And I did it in 3 minutes a day.
Fact is, thousands of Americans have done it in 3 minutes a day. That's right, in 3 minutes a day, men and women across the country have used FollyGuard to stop hair loss and replace their lost hair. How do they do it? Simple. They use FollyGuard's revolutionary 3-step process. Look, the reasons for hair loss are no secret. An excess of DHT or bad testosterone stops follicles from producing healthy hair. Polyguard combats the bad testosterone and helps you regain your hair and your appearance. Best of all, using Polyguard takes only 3 minutes a day. No sexual side effects and no costly transplants. Just your own body producing thick, healthy hair where it has stopped growing. Polyguard is 100% guaranteed or your money back. Call today, invest 3 minutes a day, and watch your lost hair grow back. It's that simple, guaranteed. Call now, 1-800-957-4762. It's guaranteed. 1-800-957-4762. Toll free, 1-800-957-4762. Get your lost hair back with Polyguard. 1-800-957-4762.
8:57, as you rejoin Curtis and Kuby, a terrible disaster has occurred at the World Trade Center. One of the towers up near about the 100th floor, apparently a plane has crashed in. We don't know the size of the plane at this particular point, according to the eyewitnesses. If we are to consider, Ron, it a normal plane crash, because planes do pass the World Trade Center on their routes to LaGuardia on a regular basis.
It is a regular flight route, but it certainly doesn't look like it could conceivably be a normal commercial jet flight.
But
so
Ron,
the speculation, it's a small private
remember,
plane.
we're just a few blocks away from the 102-story Empire State Building, which has had planes crash in it before at its highest levels. Or, unfortunately, when the World Trade Center was targeted by Muslim extremists back in the early 90s, it was chosen for what reason for that?
I mean, unfortunately, it's something I know a bit about. The Trade Center was specifically chosen by the Islamic jihadists because it was the most conspicuous symbol of American capitalism, American prosperity, and American materialism. The original plan, as conceived by the Islamic bombers, and I want to emphasize there's no indication at this point that this is anything other than an accident, but back then, in the early 90s, the original plan was to blow up one of the towers and actually cause it to collapse onto the other tower. The idea was to bring both of them down. At least that was the allegations at trial, and was ultimately proven against a number of the participants.
Well, that's just speculation, as you pointed out. But in fact, yesterday upon my return from Florida, there are many flights that actually fly directly over the World Trade Center. So, in fact, it may have just been maybe a normal passenger flight or a cargo flight of some type. We'll give you all the details as they break, as we join John Gambling as Drive Time continues with our new staff here of George Weber, Babita Hariani, and our ABC National News correspondent.
No word at this point on any injuries, no word on any fatalities. There does appear massive amounts of smoke billowing out of the building, flames that appear to be out of control, and emergency vehicles and rescue vehicles on the scene right now.
That's right, and the toughest of all jobs is when you have to fight those fires above 80 floors. Firefighters have always said it makes a really tough job that much tougher. So we'll keep you abreast of all the details. Again, if you're just joining us, apparently an aircraft of some type has crashed into one of the towers of the World Trade Center, downtown New York, at about the 100th floor, slightly above. And we'll continue with this coverage throughout the John Gambling Show and throughout the day. All of this on WABC New York. It's 9 o'clock.
This is live coverage from ABC News. I'm Jim Hickey. An airplane has crashed into the upper levels of one of the twin towers of the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan in New York. A tremendous amount of smoke is billowing from the upper levels of that tower. There is a gaping hole. Actually, there are two gaping holes in two sides of that building. Several windows have been blown out. There is no word yet on casualties. We have this eyewitness who told us what he saw.
Hello? Okay, my name is Brian Lutz. I'm about 10 blocks away north of the Empire State, of the World Trade Towers. I was looking at the Trade Towers exactly when it happened. I heard this incredibly low noise, and I knew something horrific was about to happen. I dove away from the window, not to be shattered with glass if it was a huge explosion. Within seconds after not having the glass blow into me, I looked back up. There was an incredible billowing wall of fire that shot up, almost obscuring the lower third of the radio tower, which would have been about a 20-story, 25-story ball of flame. The debris falling, it looked like a blizzard coming off the building.
Brian?
As I look at it now, there's a diagonal angle across the building at about a 45-degree angle, and it looks like just a definite gash. The upper right-hand side looks like it's the corner of a wing that just went straight into the building.
Brian, this is Jim Hickey here in New York. Can you tell us, did you actually see the plane as it smashed into the building?
The second that I heard the noise, I knew a disaster was about to happen. And I've been in an explosion before and had glass blow in. I dove away from the window. As soon as the explosion hit the north side of the north tower, I looked right back at it. The fire and smoke was just beginning to billow. I screamed for my wife to bring the binoculars. Within 10 seconds, the ball of fire had visually engulfed the whole north side, the whole upper north side of the tower.
We're looking now at pictures of that tower, and as Brian Lutz, the eyewitness, explains here, Brian, if you'll just stay with me for a second,
yes.
There's a great deal of smoke billowing from the tower still. We can see flame coming out from at least two sides of the building. Can't see around to the other side. Brian, were you able to tell us the size of the airplane? Was it a small plane, a commercial plane? Do you have any idea at all?
I will tell you from the size of the gash that the wingtip had to be at least 150 to 200 feet wide. Oh, my God!
Oh,
the next building
there's
just
another
blew
one.
up! Oh, my God! Oh, my God!
Another plane just flew in.
I feel the heat! The explosion is incredible! Oh, my God!
Another plane, as we were watching.
I don't believe this! The second tower has exploded from about the 20 stories below in a gargantuan explosion. Oh, my God, I don't believe it.
Brian Lutz there on the scene as we were talking. You just heard it.
I was looking at it. The side, the northeast corner has exploded in the most incredible explosion. Flames are flying out of the building. They're 5, 10 stories high now. Black billowing smoke. The building corner, the whole entire corner is gone. It's missing.
Brian, I don't know if you could see from your vantage point. We could see that there was actually a second plane which flew into that second tower.
I was looking at the tower itself, and nothing. It exploded from the inside out. It's on 1, 2, 3. It's on 5 floors. It's 2 separate fires now. One exactly on the corner of the northeast side, and the second one about 5 stories below it, exactly in the middle of the building.
Well,
oh, my God.
Both buildings are now burning at the upper levels. A great deal of smoke now, as we say, as Brian was describing the scene from that first explosion in the first building, we actually saw a second airplane smash into the second World Trade Center building. We could see it from our vantage point.
There's a scaffolding hanging right now. I see it. It's just swinging against the building. I have very high-powered binoculars right now. I did not see anything fly into the building. I did not see anything. I am looking directly at both Twin Towers. I can see 50% of the upper stories of both Twin Towers. The heat was so immense, I felt it here, and we are about 8, 9 blocks from the North Tower and about an additional 400 feet or 300 feet to the South Tower. Both explosions are on the north side of the towers.
We are looking at videotape replays now from our studio here, Brian, and we can actually see an airplane, looks like a twin-engine airplane, which approaches the second tower. And I'm trying to get my bearings. It appears that it approached the second tower from a westerly direction and actually smashed into the far side of the building, and flame came billowing out of the east side of the building. And now we have both Twin Towers on fire, a tremendous ball of fire, a huge explosion in the upper levels of the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan in downtown New York. No indication how it is that 2 airplanes could smash into this tallest landmark around. The World Trade Centers, of course, are a landmark in New York City that can be seen even on a cloudy day, can be seen from miles and miles around. Brian, can you tell us what's happening where you are right now?
Flames are billowing from the south, from the north side of the South Tower, and I see the corner is a mass of flames, at least 1, 2, 3, 4 stories. Then there's no smoke or flame for about 100 feet, and then there's a second 2 or 3 story high by about 75 feet wall of flames crawling up the side of the towers.
Brian, let me interrupt you just for a second, and let's go now. We have Jerry Hauer.
Very noisy here. You have to speak up.
Okay, stand by, Brian. We have Jerry Hauer on the line. Jerry Hauer, a terrorism expert formerly with the city of New York. Jerry, are you with us?
I sure am.
What are the odds that 2 airplanes are crashing into the World Trade Center and this simply be an incredible accident, or is this a terrorism attack?
Well, I think it's at this point in time, it's hard to tell what's going on. We really have to evaluate what happened. If there are 2 planes, it certainly is of concern. I think that we really need to understand what happened before we jump to any conclusions.
Jerry, are you aware of any threats, any recent threats that have been made? Of course, we're hearing about threats all the time, but anything specifically referring to the World Trade Center or to New York City?
No, there have been no specific threats that I know of. We are in an environment right now where things are extremely tense around the world, but there have been no specific threats that I know of against the Trade Center or against New York City.
Just to recap, I have Jerry Hauer on the line, a terrorism expert. 2 airplanes have crashed into both twin towers of the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan. One of the planes smashing into the second tower, even as TV cameras and radio and this network were covering this explosion. A tremendous ball of flame, and now huge clouds of dark smoke coming from both towers. And now we have, Jerry, if you'll just stand by with me, we have another eyewitness on the line who saw what happened. Could you go ahead, please? Brian, are you still with me?
I'm still here. I'm just watching it now. The South Tower is totally in blaze on the south side of on the northeast corner with the 2 things. The flames have subsided substantially on the north side of the North Tower. There's a monstrous hole. There's a gigantic 45-degree angle gash. I can see with my binoculars certainly what looks like mechanical equipment in the center of the explosion. It looks like a large tail section, if I'm not mistaken, and I don't want to presuppose something. My hands are actually shaking, so it's hard to hold these binoculars exactly steadily. The heat of the second was so immense that we felt it come right through our windows, and luckily I knew to open up the windows to allow any blast to pass through, because the window most definitely, in my opinion, might have blown in to our upper floor here. I can see now that there's fire and smoke coming from the north side of the building, and now I see tremendous smoke billowing out of the east side of the building, and this would be the explosion that just occurred.
Okay.
We're hearing people screaming, "Get off the streets, get off the streets." There's tremendous crowds here. The activity, people are screaming now, "Get out of the streets, get out of the streets." I don't know who is screaming, but panic could almost ensue rapidly if this escalates, or if another. I can't believe I saw it happen. I did not see a plane.
Brian, do you see any casualties, any people being brought out of the building? Are you that close at all?
I can't see anything below, say,
You're listening to live coverage from ABC News on a major story at this hour, a fire in both towers of the World Trade Center. We have an eyewitness, Richard Bay, our own Richard Bay, talk show host. He's there at the scene. Richard, are you with us?
Hi, yeah, I'm on the air. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. What happened?
Well,
what did you see?
I didn't see the first explosion, but I saw a plane. I can see it from my window. I live on the 38th floor on 57th Street. I got a straight view to the World Trade Towers. And I'm looking out the window when it first happened. I woke up and turned on the radio. I went to the window. There were billows of flame coming out. But then I'm sitting here with my girlfriend, and I said, look, there's another plane flying right by it. The next thing you know, she screams, and there's an explosion in the second tower.
Richard, how big of this, John Gambling, how big a plane was that?
It looked, as I'm saying, I'm on 57th Street. This is all the way downtown. It looked like a small plane to me from where I was. In fact, what my first reaction to it was, it looked like it would be maybe a news photographer who got up there to try to get close and take pictures. But it was so close. I said, my God, why is that guy flying so close?
Richard, did it look to you as though the wing sort of grazed it, or did it look like a head-on collision, or
what
couldn't you
happened
tell?
was it flew around one side. It disappeared for a moment behind the building, and the next thing I saw was a giant explosion of flames.
So, Richard, it was clearly a plane, a smaller plane, and not a helicopter that news sources would generally use in that kind of situation.
I'll tell you this, it was, 10 minutes ago? It looked like a plane to me, and it looked like a small passenger plane.
Yeah, it looked. We were able to see some news coverage because they were actually ABC Network was actually showing the building while they were doing the coverage, and you could actually see a portion of that plane making impact. That was at about 9:03 this morning, following the first plane crash,
which must have been about 8:40.
About
I would
8:40.
think. Right.
Now both towers are on fire. Both towers are smoke billowing out, and both towers have sustained hits from airplanes.
It seems to me from the pictures that I'm looking at right now that the first plane hit at approximately the 80th floor of the first tower, and the second plane is below that, probably in the 65 floor range.
The second plane was lower. And the explosion, I'll tell you this, I saw the explosion replayed on TV. The explosion from where I'm watching it was gigantic. The explosion looked like it might have, gone 15 floors from where I'm watching it from my apartment.
We have reporters. George Weber is on his way down to the scene, and I have talked with my sister, Ann Hoffman, who works at One Liberty Plaza, and I talked with her just a few minutes ago, right after the first explosion. She was scared, to say the least. They were evacuating the building, and we'll be trying to get in touch with her, but she said the explosion was absolutely intense.
And it was a big ball of orange flame that burst out from the side of the tower that's most to the east.
Well, now, Richard, from your vantage point in the towers, you have a good bird's eye view. Do you see any other aircraft in the area, particularly that might actually be defensive in nature, to prevent possibly any other further crashes into the World Trade Center?
From my vantage point, there is not one other aircraft in the air. Earlier, I did see a helicopter off at some distance, but right at this moment, and I can only see, I can't see the whole tower all the way around, right at this moment because of the smoke. But I doubt that there's an aircraft flying in that smoke either.
Mm-hmm. Well, I certainly think, guys, that you can't go too far without jumping to the conclusion that these impacts were intentional.
Well, it certainly seems unlikely that two separate planes 20 minutes apart would each crash accidentally into a different tower.
I would agree with you.
Of the Trade Center. But the fact is, we don't know, and you can have one accident. You can't have a plane coming too close, trying to get a shot, or just veering down to say, oh, let's take a look at this, and crashing again. So I don't think people should jump to conclusions.
It was a big plane. It didn't look like somebody, it didn't look like a little guy flying around to just get a peek at it.
It didn't.
And now, I want to point out, this is Phil Boyce in the newsroom, and of course, getting official information right now is difficult, but we understand in the newsroom that New York City is under a terrorist alert, that the federal buildings in the city are being shut down because the city officials are afraid that there could be another attack. Obviously, there was one and then a second one if it's a terrorist attack, and so they're concerned about that. They're also concerned about attacks on the mass transit system, anything where there's a lot of people. So right now, if those of you who are trying to get into the city by train, don't be surprised if those trains stop.
So I can take the day off, actually, and I'm not a big fan of U.S. military power, but it would be nice to see a aircraft, a military jet or so, sort of flying perimeter around here. And
absolutely,
probably
you would expect to see that at any moment. You'd expect to see U.S. military flying around the World Trade, and also perhaps the Empire State Building or any other monument that we have.
Well, in fact, the only times we've ever had airline crashes or planes crashing into buildings here before in New York, because obviously they're very high buildings and planes are constantly flying overhead, is in times of fog. But today is...
Clear day, blue sky. That's not what this is.
Couldn't be clear, even if navigation systems failed.
Not an accident.
Let me just add, we've just gotten this information just into the newsroom that the Lincoln and Holland tunnels at this point are both completely shut down, and FBI is investigating the possible plane hijacking as well into the the area.
Okay, but the Lincoln and Holland tunnels are shut down as a precautionary
right, as a precaution
measure,
right now.
not because anything has happened in the Lincoln and Holland tunnels.
You know, the point you make, Ron, is interesting because as we watch the pictures here and do the best we can to bring you this tragedy, and if you are just tuning in, each tower of the World Trade Center has been impacted by a significantly large airplane. They are both on fire at the moment. But as you point out, Ron, there are no police helicopters. There are circling the World Trade Center at the moment, and I find that most unusual. But as you say, the contingencies for this sort of thing have been in place for years, and I'm sure they're being mobilized as well.
Yeah, I mean, can't we use some of these police, these military gunships or something?
Well, yeah, you would expect to see
a little perimeter. I'm not suggesting
if you notice, just from the places where the airplanes crashed in, the unbelievable situation for those workers who are above the 80th floors, because the last time we had a blast, which was below in the parking lot of B2, there was a 1,500-pound explosion that knocked out all the electricity, knocked out the elevators, made it almost impossible to escape that situation. Luckily, most did. But this is even more devastating to those who might potentially be trapped above.
I should point out, WABC is in continuous coverage of this attack, and at 20 after, we will go to ABC News, which is using its full resources to cover this. So we will continue in coverage as long as necessary right here on WABC.
Well, gentlemen, let me just add that all three area airports have now also, as a precaution, been shut down.
Now, you know also, Phil Boyce and John Gambling, John, this is your show, and we're continuing the drive time in this area, giving the updates. But our emergency bunker, so to speak, where the entire emergency protective apparatus of the city of New York is housed,
in the World
Trade Center. Do you know what floor that's on? Isn't that about 30?
I believe so.
It is on one of the lower floors, I think.
We wondered at the time. We thought that was not such a brilliant idea.
You think you put it underground?
Attack the Trade Center. No, it's not underground.
You would think that they would.
Right, you would think they'd put it underground somewhere. But
right,
no,
but that's where all of the emergency apparatus is sort of piloted from. Now, there is a backup facility at One Police Plaza. They have all of the latest technology, the TV cameras, and the ability to assign emergency patrols and also service units. But basically, the city's lifeline is right there at the World Trade Center, and hopefully everyone is fine in that bunker system and able to follow through on the badly needed duties. We're going to be getting our national news update. Our ABC radio news correspondents are all at the scene, and collectively we'll try to put together all of the missing question marks that still exist as we watch the two World Trade Centers burn there at the top upper levels. So to our ABC Radio National News Desk for an update.
World Trade Center. The latest update from WABC Radio News.
Two planes have now crashed into New York's World Trade Center, one after the other, hitting both towers. This eyewitness was talking with ABC's Jim Hickey when...
Gargantuan explosion! Oh, my God, I don't believe it!
Brian Lutz there on the scene as we were talking. You just heard it.
I was looking at it. The northeast corner has exploded in the most incredible explosion. Flames are flying out of the building. They're 5, 10 stories high now. Black billowing smoke. The building corner, the whole entire corner is gone. It's missing.
Gaping holes on the upper stories of the New York landmark. No immediate word of injuries or fatalities. The twin disasters, which happened just before and after 9 this morning. The towers were struck by bombers 8 years ago, and the Pentagon says it had no advance warning of this attack. However, the FBI is investigating reports of a plane hijacked before the crashes. Joan Bennett, ABC News.
At this point, they believe there was no warning.
You're listening to live coverage from ABC News. Two planes have crashed into the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan in New York. I'm Jim Hickey. You were just listening to a conversation between ABC's Peter Jennings and National Security Correspondent John McWethy. And as Peter reported, the Associated Press is now reporting that officials say the FBI is investigating reports of a plane hijacking just before the crashes, just before the two planes crashed into the World Trade Center. No indication of if there indeed was a hijacking, or if there was, where it came from and where the hijacking took place. We'll correct something we said a little while ago, that there had been a bombing at the World Trade Center in 1993. That is indeed true. It was not by a plane, however. It was the bombing in the basement in the parking garage of the World Trade Center in 1993 that killed 6 people and injured many others. We still have Brian Lutz with us on the line, who's in Lower Manhattan, where there's a great deal of confusion. Brian heard and saw the explosions and was talking to us when the second plane smashed into the second tower. Brian, can you give us an update of what's happening there right now?
It's hard to hear you. There's obviously mass confusion. Flames have now started to erupt from the North Tower, both below and to the right of the diagonal gash, and above and to the left of the lower diagonal gash. They're coming out of both sides of the building now. The smoke is incredibly intense, incredibly black. I can see that the South Tower, the fire has definitely picked up some strength, and debris is just falling off the building. I mean, it's unbelievably scary to see these chunks. I mean, if I see a chunk that size, you must imagine it's 3 or 4 feet long. It's twirling like helicopter blades. I just heard another explosion. It may very well have been something inside. The second explosion was so loud and so forceful that we felt the heat come through our windows, which is we are about 7 blocks north, and our upper floor faces the Twin Towers exactly. I can see the South Tower. I can see about 70 floors, the upper 70 floors, and the North Tower I see about the upper 40 floors. The gash in the tower is about 45-degree angle, and it's got to be 250 to 250 feet at about a 40-degree angle. And I can see with my binoculars, people are screaming, get out of the streets below me. There's tremendous confusion. I can see a huge chunk of airplane that's about, appears to be maybe 10 feet in from the skin of the tower. The flames are spreading rapidly on the north side of the East Tower. Do you have any questions? I mean, I feel like I'm just talking.
No, you're doing just fine, Brian. Brian Lutz is an eyewitness in Lower Manhattan who saw both explosions of the World Trade Centers, and what Brian is telling us, the facts as he knows them, as he witnessed them. There's a great deal we don't know.
Terrorism at the World Trade Center. The latest update from WABC Radio News.
Good morning, this is Babita Hariani, and of course, as you've been listening, we've been following this major story of 2 planes that have crashed into both towers of the World Trade Center. WABC's George Weber is there live at the scene. He joins us now. George, what can you tell us?
Babita, I'm just several blocks from this right now, and I've never quite seen a scene like it as hundreds of people come streaming from the area of the World Trade Center down here, many of them sobbing, many of them trying to rush to payphones, very much like I had to do because cell service down here is almost non-existent. I'm looking up at the 2 towers right now as that smoke continues to billow out of both, flames coming from about 3/4 of the way up, debris falling, flaming debris, you can see it falling. Some eyewitnesses I talked to here who actually were here earlier and watched this said that one guy said he heard an explosion, and he looked up and he sees the flames coming out of one of the towers, and then next thing you know, he sees a plane, a large plane like a jet lighter, crashing into the other tower, which now appears to be 2 airline planes that have gone into these buildings, and one after another ambulances are rushing back and forth, bomb squad units coming back and forth, a lot of people shaking their heads and wondering, is this just a sheer accident or is it something more sinister? So certainly very early into all of this right now, and I'll try to keep you posted as best I can from my vantage point here as to what's going on in lower downtown at the World Trade Center.
George, this is Phil Boyce. I don't think too many people are asking that question anymore. I think just about everybody is assured that this must be a terrorist attack.
Well, everybody except
Ron
Kuby, who's still saying it seems unlikely, but let's not assume the worst until we have some proof. The only thing we're doing is speculating based on the inherent unlikelihood of two planes crashing into two World Trade Center towers within 15 minutes apart. And I agree
you
with
have to agree, Ron, is like 99.9% unlikely.
It doesn't look good.
It doesn't look good. And we should point out, do not try to come on to the island of Manhattan. The island is virtually shut down.
That's right. The Lincoln and Holland tunnels closed. The airports are shut down. And we just got a report moments ago that the FBI is now saying that it is not a terrorist attack and wants to get the word out it was not a terrorist attack. So the FBI has just come through with that
was it an attack by nice people, or was it not an attack at all?
Do they know what the FBI is basing that on?
FBI just basically released that statement alone. I just
How
got
would
from the
they know?
newsroom.
Right. Let's
it's hard to imagine they would know at this point because it's just been several minutes, but the FBI is just releasing that word now.
See that, Phil?
I think even Ron doubts that point.
And if I can interrupt here for just a second, from down in front of the World Trade Center, even though there are a number of people here who haven't heard news reports, so they haven't heard the analysis that you're making or the theory that's coming out of others. These are just people who were down here who say they witnessed part of this, and the first thing off the top of their head was, come on, I mean, how likely is it that this could happen? That two jetliners, at least the size of jetliners, could crash into each individual tower of the World Trade Center?
All right, if you remember also, back in 1993, the original World Trade Center blast, that done by the van that was parked in the parking lot, most of the major news outlets actually broadcast off the tower of the World Trade Center. They were all knocked out except for Channel 2. Ever since then, realizing that might happen again in their plans, they also have facilities on the Empire State Building so they can continue their broadcast.
People are curious why the bridges and tunnels are shut down. I just want to point out, back in 1995, when there was the sort of second son of World Trade Center bombing plot, those individuals who were also Islamists, some of whom I ended up representing, in fact, planned to blow up simultaneously the Lincoln Tunnel, the Holland Tunnel, as well as the George Washington Bridge and the United Nations. Now, that attack never got anywhere.
Simultaneously?
Yeah, that was the idea. It never got very far.
Well, it sounds like this is the plan B.
No, it doesn't look
Doesn't
good.
it? Well, why don't we go and take a quick look at traffic? Debbie Duhame is I'm sure traffic has got to be a mess. Debbie, are you there?
Yes, I am. Traffic is a nightmare. All of the bridges and tunnels getting into the city are being shut down right now. Lincoln, Holland, George, shut. Forget about it. Turn around, go back home. 59th Street Bridge being closed. Queens Midtown Tunnel, Brooklyn Bridge, Williamsburg, Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. Again, the Manhattan Bridge. Everything being closed heading into the city. And, of course, you want to avoid the area of the Twin Towers right now. You have tons of emergency vehicles there. And also all the area airports are closed. Newark, Kennedy, LaGuardia, all the major airports are shut down right now. So, again, avoid this area of the city. It is a nightmare. Back over to you in the studio.
If we can,
we are going to a news update is that 30:30? So we've got 45 seconds.
All right, and in fact, we have on the line one of the commissioners of the city of New York, Jerry Camerata, because we're trying to find out if, in fact, the emergency services shelter facility that controls all of the movements of our public safety aspects has been affected. We'll talk to him after the break. We'll get an update on what the city is doing to try to get a hold on this situation. But again, our ABC National Radio News Division is on the scene. They're going to give us a further update. Bobita, you were talking about an FBI possible report. So let's go to the ABC Radio National Desk.
At the World Trade Center. The latest update from WABC Radio News.
Gargantuan explosion. Oh, my God, I don't believe it.
An eyewitness to an unbelievable disaster within the past hour. A plane apparently hit one of the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan in New York.
Ordered that the full resources of the federal government go to help the victims and their families and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act.
This is a live statement by President
Terrorism
Bush.
against our nation will not stand. And now, if you join me in a moment of silence. May God bless the victims, their families, and America. Thank you very much.
All right, we're back in the
Yes,
WABC newsroom, and we have someone joining us.
9:31, one of the commissioners of the city of New York, Jerry Camerata, who's down near the scene. Thanks for joining us, Jerry.
Very well.
Now, Jerry, can you tell us, we know that emergency services is directed from some part of the World Trade Center,
Well, actually,
facility.
we're in the building adjacent to the Twin Towers. That is now being evacuated, so this phone call will be cut short. All of the public buildings, as you've heard probably on your news, all of our rails and all of our bridges have been closed. The debris is blocks from the World Trade Center as it exists right now. Literally, as we're speaking, people are either jumping out of the building from 60, 70, 80, 90 floors up, or are just simply falling out of the windows. One of the most horrific things we've ever seen in all of our lives. The panic, particularly with our kids in the local schools down here, has been on. Phones have to be dropped. I have to get out right now. I'm sorry. Talk to you later.
All right, Commissioner. That was Commissioner Jerry Camerata, Youth Services Commissioner, but one who's always involved whenever an emergency situation takes place.
And obviously, Curtis, this emphasizes the horrendous personal toll that this must be taking or has taken on those buildings, that people that were trapped in those two buildings. We have no idea how many injuries, but I'm sure it could easily be hundreds. And right now, people still trying to get out of the World Trade Center. And as Jerry just told us from right next door, people actually jumping out of the World Trade Center. It must be a horrific sight.
And Phil, we've also gotten unconfirmed reports, unconfirmed at this point from the newsroom, that as many as 50, perhaps even more, were on board one of the planes that crashed. So
that means if that's true, now we emphasize we don't know about a lot of these things that are coming in the newsroom, but that indicates a possibility of a hijacking.
Right. The FBI had said that they were investigating possibly investigating a hijacking just before the crash occurred. So that may be, part of the story there.
And it looked to me, watching the video of the second plane, it looked to me that was a 737, or at least a comparable size to a 737 aircraft.
Well, absolutely. It was certainly not a Cessna 172 or 182.
And it was moving at least 300 miles an hour when it hit the building.
Now, you would have to believe, with all of the television helicopter live shots, that somebody might have gotten a shot at that thing so we could identify it, because we don't know if that was an airliner. We don't know right now. All we saw were a distant shot of it hitting the second tower. So if it was an airliner, you'd think that somebody would have noticed it, and we'd be getting those reports.
And it
right
would
about
have been on a flight plan. I mean, we would know at least what airliners were scheduled to be landing and taking off and in that flight area, and which ones didn't make it. So we should have some notion fairly soon as to what this plane, who was on at least the second plane, the one that we saw in 903.
It's so serious, as you heard Commissioner Jerry Camerata. They're abandoning the emergency service bunker there that has been set up exactly for these kinds of emergencies because of the danger that may come their way and to others who are in nearby buildings surrounding the World Trade Center.
Gentlemen, we just got a report to unidentified sources as well, saying that an American Airlines 767 from Boston that was coming in from Boston was the plane. But again, they're unidentified sources. The second plane, that is the second plane that came in and slammed into one of the towers. So we will find out more. We're finding out, every few minutes what is more
you're
details.
just identifying the possible nature of the plane, but not necessarily that it had been hijacked.
No, not sure. If the FBI was just saying that they were investigating a possible hijacking. We just got an unconfirmed report that it was an American Airlines 767. That was the second plane that crashed.
Airliners do not fly into the World Trade Center. I mean, it's just unless they are directed that way by its pilot. Right. Obviously, this is not something that's accidental. I think it's interesting, too, that Manhattan Island, as you pointed out, Phil Boyce, is completely locked down.
We're locked down. Both those of us who are on Manhattan can't get off, and those of us who are not on this island cannot get on, and for good reason, as they've shut down virtually every major transit route into or off of the island.
And the impact, beyond obviously the human tragedy that is taking place as we speak in both towers of the World Trade Center, the impact of this globally is incomprehensible. When you think about the financial markets and all of the other things that swirl around New York and America, this is literally incomprehensible in scope.
The very reason we saw the president address the nation and seemed to contradict the FBI, because I don't know about you gentlemen and Barbita, but my impression was the president has pretty much determined this is an act of terrorism.
But again, this is also President G.W. Bush, so let's not jump to any conclusions either. Let's just wait a little longer for some facts to come in.
Is it okay if a few of us start to assume this is a terrorist attack?
You can assume it. I just don't think that based on G.W. Bush talking about
He is the president of the United
I know
States,
that,
Ron.
but he's not often the most well-informed guy around, Phil.
Well, but right now, you would think he would be
you
locked
would think,
into the information pipeline.
And you would even hope. I'm just not
All right,
assuming.
but Ron,
that he is,
I
that
think
he
it's
does.
fair to say that people in the Middle East who have declared America to be the big
excuse me.
Satan
Not only are we
and
calling
Israel
it
the little
terrorism,
Satan.
now we're already pointing fingers.
Well,
okay,
excuse me, Ron. Who has targeted the World Trade Center before? And you even explained why they targeted it.
I remember when the Murrah building went up, and for a day and a half, everybody was talking about, yes, the terrorist cells right there in Oklahoma. It's a hotbed of Middle Eastern Arab activity. No doubt these were Arab terrorists who blew up the Murrah building.
Well,
it turned out to be blonde-haired, blue-eyed, corn-fed, flag-waving country boys.
Can we talk probabilities, though? Is it more likely that this might have something to do with the Middle East than it does with the Michigan militia? Wouldn't it be more likely?
That would have been the case in the Murrah Federal Building, too. It absolutely would have been much more likely that it was Arab terrorists who blew up the Federal Building
and that's
in
why
Oklahoma
people assumed it.
than it was, in fact, a bunch of neo-Nazi white people. But, hey,
as
what
you
did it turn
know,
out to be? So let's just...
in radical Muslim literature, they refer to New York City as sort of the Jewish capital of the world. Even larger in scope than Tel Aviv, the real capital in Israel.
Certainly the Twin Towers were specific targets of the original bombing, and I know those folks who were convicted of it, and they specifically talked about the importance of hitting the Trade Center as a target of American corporate wealth and
All right, before we go anywhere, before we get our national update, back to Commissioner Jerry Camerata, who's found another line to speak to us. Jerry, any updates?
Yeah, sorry for the delay. They've just evacuated us from the building adjacent to the World Trade Center. There's a suspect of possibly another plane in the air. So now all emergency services are being evacuated out of the building where everybody could be very susceptible here. Again, the debris is absolutely all over for blocks. All city agencies are done, but more importantly, the public schools that are down here. Parents that were here, eyewitness with many of the children seeing the explosion, have now taken those kids home. We have security in those schools. The schools are being used for whatever purpose is necessary as a shelter area. Truly, the amount of tears and the amount of despair in the eyes of the people today out on the street is just something to behold. Once again, as we saw with the last World Trade Center, people come together, helping each other,
now,
trying to make a move away from the area.
From the pictures
I'm sorry,
we
Curtis,
see,
a little louder, please.
From the pictures we see, we don't see any aircraft in the area like NYPD helicopters or any other possible military aircraft to protect any further attacks. Do you know if anything is airborne to protect the building from further attacks?
I don't know, but I know the President of the United States gave a message just a little while ago. I was not privy to what he said. I'm assuming that kind of alert has been done. Right now, I just think they're trying to keep everything as far away from this building as possible. They don't know what the potential explosive possibilities may be.
Jerry Camerata, if you can stay in touch with us, because we have a status report coming up from our national ABC radio news desk about further developments in this horrible plane crashes into both towers of the World Trade Center.
Terrorism at the World Trade Center. The latest update from WABC Radio News.
Disaster in New York City. 2 planes, minutes apart, have crashed into the upper floors of each tower of the World Trade Center. Both towers engulfed in flames. It appears to be a terrorist attack. That from President Bush.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a difficult moment for America. I, unfortunately, will be going back to Washington after my remarks. Secretary Rod Pace and Lieutenant Governor will take the podium and discuss education. I do want to thank the folks here at the Booker Elementary School for their hospitality. Today, we've had a national tragedy. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country. I have spoken to the Vice President, to the Governor of New York, to the Director of the FBI, and have ordered that the full resources of the federal government go to help the victims and their families, and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act.
President Bush, while everything is preliminary, a source tells the Associated Press the reports that the planes were hijacked are being investigated. Hijacked and purposely flown into both towers of the World Trade Center,
We're live with ABC's Tim Sheld. Tim is literally stuck on the George Washington Bridge. Tim, are you with us?
Larry, yes. New York City has virtually been shut down as a result of this chaos today. Remember, Larry, tens of thousands of people work in the World Trade Center complex. Imagine the chaos there. But the city has literally shut down avenues to get in, like the George Washington Bridge that I can see closed in front of me. The Lincoln and Holland tunnels closed as well. The scope of the tragedy not even near in our view yet.
ABC's Tim Sheld with us live. Again, 2 planes crashed, apparently deliberately, an apparent terrorist attack, according to President Bush, into the Twin Towers, into the World Trade Center in New York City. I'm Larry Jacobs, ABC News.
This is continuous coverage of the attack on the World Trade Center. From WABC Radio News, this is WABC New York.
Good morning. This is Babita Hariani from the WABC newsroom, and as you've been hearing all morning long for the last hour and a half or so, hour and 40 minutes, we have reports that 2 planes crashed into both towers of the World Trade Center. One about 8:40, that was in the North Tower. Then just after 9 o'clock in the morning, another plane, possibly a 767, an American Airlines jet, is the reports that we're getting at this moment. You heard the president a couple minutes ago saying it was indeed a terrorist attack. The FBI had earlier reported that it was investigating a possible hijacking, that planes crashed. Bellevue Hospital, we're told now, is now the command center for all injuries for anybody that needs to find out about family or loved ones. Reports we have that people are jumping or just falling out of the windows as they try to evacuate the buildings. We're also told the airports are closed, the tunnels are shut down, the bridge shut down, and there is debris all over several blocks there. We're going to go live back to ABC News coverage now in Washington on yet another update.
Rising from behind the old executive office building. We have people on their way there now, but it's like nothing I've ever seen. I mean,
we're looking at a fire that's on television right now. There is a fire in Washington, D.C. as well.
I must also tell you, Claire, I think if you think about what's behind the EOB there, you're really down in pretty open area. It doesn't look like a place where a building would be on fire.
No, that's right, although there are a number of buildings just behind the old executive office building on G Street that could potentially be on fire, but nothing you would necessarily think of as a target. Apparently, we're also...
Claire, let me interrupt you for a second. We now have fire confirmed at the Pentagon. John McCarthy at the Pentagon can hear me. John, please get in touch immediately if you can and brief us in there. John McCarthy has actually been evacuated from the Pentagon, and parts of the Pentagon are indeed being evacuated. We want to hold our breath here, it just seems to me, for a second, and not get into a mode that the country is under attack. But we now have 2 attacks on the Twin Trade Tower Center. U.S. buildings, city buildings completely evacuated in New York City. We have this mysterious black smoke at the southwest corner of the White House, which is to say there's something going on behind the old executive office building. We now have a report that fire has been confirmed at the Pentagon. ABC's John McCarthy, our Pentagon correspondent, who's been plugging in as quickly to the intelligence and counterintelligence units there this morning, has been temporarily evacuated. But that is as much as we know for sure.
Well, you're listening to live coverage from ABC News. That's Peter Jennings on our ABC television station. And we've had several different things happen in the last couple of minutes. Let me try as best as I can to update you. We have a report that the White House is being completely evacuated at the moment. The Pentagon, that there is a fire at the Pentagon. And, of course, right here in New York, just ongoing at this point, both towers of the World Trade Center hit in 2 separate plane crashes, and we are just at the point where people are being evacuated. Lots of emergency crews on the scene trying to help people there.
And Babita, we are getting some reports now that this fire at the Pentagon may have been caused by a 3rd plane. And, of course, that makes some sense because the Pentagon is a fortress, and it would be very difficult to get any kind of a terrorist attack in there. So the possibility exists of a 3rd terrorist attack now on the Pentagon, and, of course, that explains why they would be evacuating the White House.
Right.
You remember a few years ago, some nut job tried to land a plane or crash a plane into the White House, and that failed. But this did not fail, of course, if it was intended to land at the Pentagon.
And we had a couple of minutes ago, there's some reports that yet a third plane was sighted here in the New York City area,
right,
but we are waiting to hear.
Simply a third plane in the area without any indication that it posed any threat.
Well, actually,
all the airports in the metropolitan area, they're all
well,
closed.
it's interesting. The FBI had said, put out a statement a short while ago that this was not a terrorist attack. Then we heard the president a few moments ago saying,
apparent. No, he said apparently.
Apparent terrorist attack.
If you look at the proximity of National Airport, Ronald Reagan Airport, the airport I flew into last night, you actually pass over the Pentagon. It's one of the few buildings that you pass over right before you hit the landing strip. So if, in fact, a plane were taken, hijacked possibly from that airport, the possibility is that it would have been a very short distance between takeoff to actual crash site, if, in fact, that's what
I would
occurred.
have to ask our resident skeptic right here who's been cautioning. Ron Kuby, what do you think?
Yeah, assuming that indeed it was a third plane in the Pentagon, which I agree almost have to be given what it is, the likelihood of 3 separate planes within an hour hitting 3 separate targets, the symbol of American military power as well as the symbol of American corporate wealth, simultaneously by accident strikes even me.
So now that we've had, Ron, now that we've had not
so
one,
I will
two,
join.
now,
I will join the apparent terrorist attack crowd here.
What it appears to be 3 airplanes have crashed into American facilities, 2 in the World Trade Center, now perhaps 1 into the Pentagon. We have to be alert. There could be another one.
Oh, exactly.
Right, and we
absolutely.
also have a mysterious fire in one corner of the White House that we're getting reports of.
So why don't we do this? Why don't we stay out of big, crowded public buildings today? Why don't we stay out of trying to come to New York City? Don't try to come into New York City. You're not going to get in. Don't try to leave New York City because you're not going to get out. Those of you who are at home, stay there and listen to us.
It would be interesting to know right at the moment what the status of our American military forces are around the world, because usually these sort of things, and we are now seeing on the television a picture of Air Force One, which that's got to make you a little nervous to think about that. But the status.
Yeah, old George bailing out.
Well, no,
I'd like to see a few fighter planes.
No, they
myself.
go to the command. They go to the command mode where they move the executive offices to Air Force One.
So you think there's a possibility that the president might be getting airborne?
I'm looking at pictures of Air Force One with people standing around it and people checking it and looking as though
you're
it's
absolutely right, John.
Getting ready.
I think they're getting ready to put the president on Air Force One.
And that plane can stay airborne virtually forever with refueling. I mean, this is a very, very scary situation.
We're 1 minute away from an ABC status report, and let me point out we're now joined by our sister station, 1050 ESPN. We're now in simulcast coverage of this tragic event, terrorist attack, both on Manhattan, also perhaps on the Pentagon, and of course on the United States of America. We still do not know, Babita, how many people might have been injured in that World Trade Center attack about an hour ago.
Well, in fact, the president may be heading back to a safer location in the capital area because he's in Sarasota, Florida now. That's maybe why they're preparing Air Force One. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll continue our round-the-clock coverage. We will not abandon this story as news breaks every few seconds. That's why we're going to our ABC National Radio News Desk for an update.
Terrorism at the World Trade Center. The latest update from WABC Radio News.
The FAA has grounded all air takeoffs nationwide this morning after what can only be described as a series of mind-boggling events have taken place. The first one this morning at the World Trade Center.
Today we've had a national tragedy. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country.
President Bush making the comments before heading back to the White House. Brian Lutz works in New York City near the Trade Center. He saw it as it happened.
Smoke is continuing to billow. It's getting black and blacker. Oh, my God. I don't believe it. It's spreading so fast. Debris is falling off the building as I speak. Black smoke is pouring out of the building. The building is completely falling off the side. Pieces of the building are falling off the side of the building.
We're also getting word that the Pentagon and the Treasury Departments have been evacuated. I'm Daria Albinger, ABC News.
This is continuous coverage of the attack on the World Trade Center from WABC Radio News. This is WABC New York.
And we are joined by our sister station, 1050 ESPN. We're in simulcast continuous coverage. We have Babita Hariani of the News Center. We have Curtis Sliwa. We have Ron Kuby. I don't think I've ever called you Sliwa before, excuse me. And John Gambling. We're now getting a report from NBC that all air travel in the country has been stopped. All airports have been shut down, and those planes that are in the air, obviously, are going to have to land somewhere.
Right. In fact, my mother's flying in this morning from London, so I'm wondering, in that case, what happens? They just land him in another country and keep him aside?
Babita, let's go to our newsmaker telephone right now, because on it is Director Robert Heibel, a retired FBI agent who served as the Bureau's Deputy Chief of Counterterrorism. Bob, what do you make of this situation?
To me, it's not unexpected, and we just saw a plane fly into it on TV.
Fly into what?
Well, we're looking at a rerun here.
Of what?
I'm not surprised, personally, by what's happened. It's just been a matter of wondering when it was going to happen. And actually, when Oklahoma City took place, looking at those scenes, it looked like Lebanon did in the 80s.
Robert, we just saw a picture of Air Force One. Do you believe in this situation the president and his staff will be moved to the airplane?
That's a Secret Service decision. I can't tell you what their emergency plans would be, but in view of what's happened at the Pentagon in Washington, I think they're going to keep them away from Washington personally.
Well, and all air travel ceasing for at least 7 hours, that's unheard of.
Certainly unheard of, but not, I think, an unwise move, because what you've got, of course, is the hijacking of the American Airlines flight from Boston to Washington. So it's logical that they may do, something else may happen.
That's new information. We had not reported that.
Which?
Had we? The hijacking of the American Airlines from Boston to Washington?
We had, it was speculated. Okay. It was rumored that had taken place.
I think that's been confirmed now. The question is, where did the other plane come from, the second plane come from?
And you've also heard, Robert, that there's speculation that a plane has crashed into the Pentagon as well.
Well, yes, or else a helicopter landed on the pad and they exploded it. And I'm sure the Pentagon, has taken all kinds of measures to stop trucks and cars and so on and so forth.
When you were Deputy Chief of Counterterrorism with the FBI, this scenario of planes into the World Trade Center, was that discussed? Was that rumored? Had you heard from your sources that this was a possibility?
You have to remember, I was in that job 15 years ago, and what's happened is the whole terrorist picture has changed. So today, the leftists that were so active in those days are gone, and what you're facing now is you're facing the Islamic zealot. And we shouldn't be surprised by what's happened here, taking a look at the embassy bombings in
well, not surprised,
Kenya,
but of course shocked.
I think we're
Robert, you don't have, Robert, excuse me, you don't have any indication at this point that an Islamist group was behind this. I mean, because Colin Powell just recently, yesterday, denounced the right-wing paramilitaries in Colombia.
If I might interrupt right now, we just have pictures of Air Force One leaving Andrews Air Force Base. They're up, and we don't know who's on board.
We
if
assume
anybody,
the president would be on board, but we don't know that for sure.
Exactly. So, we're talking with Robert Heibel, retired FBI agent who served as the Bureau's Deputy Chief of Counterterrorism. Can you tell us anything more about plans that are in place, that what we might expect? I mean, we are watching and seeing and hearing unprecedented things taking place. New York City is completely locked down. Air travel has been suspended across the entire United States. Think of the numbers of people in aircraft that are being affected by that. What might we else expect this afternoon?
I think probably that a lot of people are just waiting for the other shoes to fall, if there are any.
You mean another attack?
If I were doing this and I were doing synchronized attacks, I would be looking at doing something. I would carry it probably across the country.
Do you believe
whether or not that's going to happen? I don't know.
Robert, do you believe that there might be international troop movements that are going on at this point?
I don't see that.
Okay. Do you think that this is strictly a domestic situation?
I do not think it's strictly a domestic situation. I think it's an international situation. I don't think this is some attack by some loner who was a member of a militia. Who's
obviously couldn't be a loner now because he's got accomplices. But Mr. Heibel, just a quick question for you: is it unusual or odd that there would not have been a rumor or a threat, or usually we get a warning that we're under some kind of a terrorist attack?
This is not some group that's worried about casualties. You hijack a plane and fly a couple hundred people into the side of a building. You're not worried about casualties. And why should they give a warning? They didn't give a warning in Kenya or Tanzania. They didn't give a warning in Saudi Arabia when they bombed the barracks there. All a warning does is gives the opponent a chance to take steps to counter them.
And Mr. Heibel, can you just give me your guess on who would want to do this? Maybe is there like 1, 2, and 3 as far as suspects?
I don't think it takes a genius to be, pick number one suspect, and that's Osama bin Laden and his group Al Qaeda and their followers.
Would there be a number 2 in your mind?
That's them, but that would be my number one on my hit parade.
And would there be a number 2 on your hit parade?
I really don't have a number 2 at this point.
We're getting reports now, ladies and gentlemen, that there was a terrorist. This is a rumor. This has not been confirmed that there was a terrorist attack on the White House prior to what we have seen here in New York.
We did have a report of a fire at the White House, and so who knows what they could have come from.
And just to kind of recap, we believe that Air Force One, we know that Air Force One is taken off from Andrews Air Force Base. There is no word as to where the president and his staff are at the moment. We should not forget that the World Trade Centers, both towers, the North and South towers, are in flames at the moment.
And it does not appear that
there's any sort of rescue
exactly at all.
And now those buildings have been burning. The first plane struck the North Tower at approximately 8:40 this morning. The second plane, it has been said that it's an American Airlines 767 from Boston, flew into the South Tower at 9:03 this morning. And so we are now talking over almost an hour and a half since this attack on the United States has taken place. There has been some sort of an attack on the Pentagon in Washington, and rumors that there has been an attack on the White House as well.
And our New York City Fire Department, which practices regularly in the high-rise buildings for just such accidents, so to speak, when a plane crashes into a building or a terrorist strike, obviously their full experiences are being called into play because the work they're being asked to do is extremely dangerous. When you look at the pictures of the fire that continues to burn at the upper levels of the World Trade Center. I believe, though, originally, gentlemen, correct me, but the president was in Sarasota, Florida. That's where he addressed the nation. I don't believe he was in the Capital Land area.
So when that Air Force One took off, where
was it? It was not from Andrews. It would have been from Sarasota.
From Sarasota, although I stand to be corrected on that.
Heibel, thank you very much.
Yes, Mr. Heibel, thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
And by the way, this is WAVD New York and WABC 770 in New York. We are simulcasting on our sister station, ESPN 1050. At the top of the hour, we're going to go back to ABC News coverage and continue to report on this tragedy. Again, both New York City and now the whole country impacted by what we now obviously all believe is to be a huge terrorist attack on the United States.
All right, we are going to go in just a few moments to ABC News. Let me just recap for the next few seconds what we know at this point.
And tell us about the traffic situation.
All right.
All right, we're going to go to ABC Audio right now.
And now it looks almost like a mushroom cloud explosion, this huge billowing smoke in the second tower. This was the second of the two towers hit. And I cannot see behind that smoke, obviously, as you can either. The first tower in front has not changed. And we see this extraordinarily and frightening scene behind us of this second tower, now just encased in smoke. What is behind it? I cannot tell you.
And this is a description of smoke that's just pouring.
We now apparently have another attack on the World Trade Center.
It has,
or at least another
collapsed.
explosion
Let's go now to Peter Jennings and the network to listen to the very latest.
It's not there anymore.
That should be it.
It
Thanks
has
very much,
completely
Dan.
collapsed.
The whole side has collapsed?
The whole building has collapsed.
The whole building has collapsed?
The building has collapsed.
That's the southern tower you're talking
Exactly. The second building that we witnessed the airplane enter had been, the top half had been fully involved in flame. It just collapsed. There is panic on the streets. Thousands of people running up Church Street, which is what I'm looking out on, trying to get away. But the entire, at least as far as I can see, the top half of the building, at least half of it, I can't see below that, half of it just started with a gigantic rumble, folded in on itself, and collapsed in a huge plume of smoke and dust.
We're talking about massive casualties here at the moment, and we have... That is extraordinary.
There is panic on the streets. There are people screaming and running from the site. The gigantic plume of smoke has reached me, and I'm probably a quarter of a mile north of there.
Peter. Now this is what it looked like moments ago. My God. Southern.
All right, we're really looking right now at a collapse of one of the World Trade Center towers we're listening to.
Eastern time,
and the building, there must be massive casualties. The building, one of them, I believe it is the North Tower. Is it?
I think they said the South Tower.
The South Tower completely collapsed.
If you wish to bring anybody who's ever watched a building being demolished on purpose knows that if you're going to do this, you have to get at the under infrastructure of a building and bring it down.
Peter?
Yes, Dan.
What appeared to happen from my vantage point, the top part of the building was totally involved in fire, and there appeared to be no effort possible to put that fire out. It looked like the top part of the building was so weakened by the fire that the weight of it collapsed the rest of the building. That's what appeared to happen. I did not see anything happening at the base of the building. It all appeared to start at the top and then just collapse the rest of the building by the sheer weight of the top.
And now we also have reports of Sears Towers evacuated as well.
But I did see that the top part of it started to collapse. The walls started to bulge out, bricks, glass things coming out, and then it collapsed in on itself, and it appeared to just fold down from there, from the very top.
Thanks, Don, very much. Just looking at that, I don't know why, but when was the last time the United States was attacked in this fashion? It was Pearl Harbor in 1941.
From the scene now, there's obviously massive casualties. Usually during these things, there's a little bit of a high pitch, but basic calm over the police radios among the emergency workers. I can hear them screaming, signal 1013, which is the police code for help, calling for help at the triage center, where other people who are already injured have been injured more, confirming that the building has collapsed. Dozens of officers, more civilians are injured. And we don't know, although I'd have to suggest, given the size of that building, what progress the evacuation was in of the tower that collapsed.
Yes, Pierre Thomas.
One thing I might add is that in recent years, the U.S. government has been preparing for massive attacks, but it's been primarily focused on biological, often bombing attacks. One of the things I have not heard discussed at all in government circles is the notion that someone would hijack a plane and perhaps fly it into a building. So one of the questions that I'm sure that will come out of this, if this indeed is a terrorist attack, is what kind of defenses did the U.S. have in place to deal with an event like this?
Well, we talked about that even, Pierre, just before you came and joined us, because at the Emergency Management Center, which is just literally in the same complex as the trade towers, they talk at great length about their preparations for a biological, a chemical warfare attack, how they closed tunnel. I mean, they've been very efficient, taken it very seriously for many years. I'd be a little surprised if the notion of an airborne attack on a United States target had not been discussed. But the notion of the intelligence services knowing absolutely nothing of what is going on today and saying openly right away they had no warnings whatsoever is, and you say something very important, if this is a terrorist attack. We just keep saying that on a repeated basis. Not having any notion whatsoever of what's going on is to be reminded not only of the efficiency of terrorism, but just reminded the efficiency of terrorism.
It's ironic. There's a chilling story. Lou Shalero of the FBI, who was part of the capture of Ramzi Youssef, who was the mastermind of the last bombing of the World Trade Center, told me this story, that he was flying over the World Trade Center in a helicopter with the suspect Ramzi Youssef next to him after he was captured in Pakistan. And as they passed over, Lou Shalero nudged him and said to Ramzi Youssef, you see, it's still standing. And Ramzi Youssef smiled and said to the FBI's assistant director, it wouldn't be if I'd had more money. This was...
In other words, more money to buy explosives, more money to run a more efficient operation than the one he ran from New Jersey in '93.
Exactly. And I mean, we may have seen the second coming of that plan.
John McCarthy is on the phone at the Pentagon. Hold it. Let me just... John McCarthy, we've now heard reports that 3 planes have been hijacked today. Can you confirm that? Jack McCarthy at the Pentagon? Okay, then let me go quickly to someone named Don Wright, who saw the plane crash into the Pentagon. Don, are you there in Washington?
Yes, I am.
Can you tell us what happened?
Yes, it was about 9:35, and I was looking out our 12th floor windows at 1600 Wilson Boulevard in Rosslyn, Virginia, and I watched this. It looked like a commuter plane, 2-engine, come down from the south, real low, proceed right on and crashed right into the Pentagon.
Went directly into the Pentagon?
That is correct.
Looked like a deliberate act?
A deliberate act, sir.
And can you tell me what direction it came from, Don?
It came from the south.
Came from the south, up along the river, across the land?
It came from the south.
Okay, and did you happen to look at your watch? We thought it was just a little bit before 10 o'clock.
Well, I was watching ABC News, watching the Twin Tower, and about the time I saw the plane, I watched it come in very low over the trees, and it just dipped down, came down right over 395, right into the Pentagon.
And are you fairly sure that it was what we sometimes describe and recognize as a small commuter plane?
Yes, it was.
Good, Don. Thank you very much. Appreciate your help. Don Wright, an eyewitness to the crash at the Pentagon. Now, we have had, as I said, reports today. There are hundreds of reports flying around, and so we beg your indulgence on us saying as often as we do, these are reports. They're sometimes unconfirmed. They're sometimes confirmed. We'll try to make it absolutely clear what we absolutely know and what we're uncertain about. There are now reports around of 3 aircraft having been hijacked today. So we have at least, because we've now had eyewitnesses to 3 apparently deliberate aerial assaults involving the aircraft themselves, 2 on the trade towers in New York City, and 1 on the Pentagon itself, just described by Don Wright as a small 2-engine commuter plane which came up from the south. And we now believe that 3 planes were hijacked, 2 of them from Boston and 1 from somewhere else. We are not yet sure precisely what's happened. John, you're listening. Just to clarify for people, John, who's one of our leading reporters on crime, knows New York City probably better than anybody in many news divisions. I cannot tell you where that happens. That's either U.S. Air Force or Navy aircraft, fighter aircraft, now on patrol in what we've described as the no-fly zone over New York City today, lest there be one more attempt. John, go ahead.
They've continued evacuations in the area now. They're evacuating Battery Park City, which is a large apartment complex taking up many blocks across the street from the World Trade Center. And they've evacuated the federal court buildings where the terrorism trials of Ramzi Youssef and others were held. Anything that could be a symbolic target is now being emptied out in New York. New York is going into kind of a lockdown mode. I think you'll also see in Washington the same kind of air patrols have been scrambled around principal buildings there.
Okay. We have on the phone one of those people who makes his living analyzing terrorism. Kyle Olson, do you hear me?
Yes, I do.
I wonder if on a day like this anybody wants to be thought of as an expert on terrorism. Be that as it may, and assuming that, and knowing that much of the country is shocked at the apparent breadth of this, are you?
Well, this is the kind of attack that has fallen more into Tom Clancy novels than into actual response planning. Having said that, we've been anticipating for a long time. We've wondered why it's been so relatively quiet. The suggestions of Osama bin Laden's involvement. What has he been doing since Cole? Other groups out there with a real or imagined grudge against the United States. The nature of the event is shocking. The fact that it's happened is not.
Thank you very much, Kyle. Really appreciate it. Kyle Olson.
Yeah, one quick thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
One quick thing. The suggestions that are floating around out there right now. There's apparently this claim from the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine.
Right.
Very interesting to note. If this is legitimate, if this claim stands up, this appears to be the first time this group has targeted Americans. This group has primarily steered away from the more extreme end of the violence scale. They focused less on suicide bombings,
more on gun attacks and that sort of thing in the territories against Israelis.
Well, if
this holds up, this is a very different tactic.
Well, if it is true, and of course the Democratic Front for Liberation of Palestine was very much involved in attacking aircraft in the 1970s, which carried Americans. So certainly let's accept your notion that it's a recent attack on Americans. Thank you, Carl, very much.
You bet.
As Mr. Olson makes clear, there has been at least one claim, and those of us who cover this for a very long period of time are always suspicious of claims. People who cover international terrorism. I'm going to interrupt myself. Linda Douglas, our Capitol Hill correspondent, I think is on the phone, and if she's not, she already reports there has been an explosion of some kind at the Capitol. Is Linda Douglas on the telephone? Let's get her on the phone as quickly as we have. She just reported a couple of minutes ago that the leaders of the Congress, Senator Lott, Senator Daschle, the Republican and Democratic leaders in the Senate, had been taken to some undisclosed secure location. Our general assumption is that there's no panic involved in this, that somebody in the Capitol building, as someone in the White House, has a book which says that when these things happen, here, Thomas, maybe you can confirm this for me, when these things happen, there are certain modalities which you behave, and as you see the hierarchy of the American political establishment, the military establishment being attacked, you want to protect the chain of command.
Absolutely. The first thing they try to do is get everyone in secure positions so they can gather information and make decisions about what to do next. One of the things that law enforcement officials had been planning for is the notion of a multi-tiered attack, an attack occurring in multiple places simultaneously. Because one of the things they've talked about is that terrorists want to project more fear, as much fear as possible, and one of the ways you can do it is to have this notion that attacks are happening on multiple fronts.
Yeah, well, and we've never seen anything like this before in the United States, of course, and in fact, not seen anything like this in my recollection. I've been doing this for 30-some-odd years. I don't recall any multitude of attacks. We've had 2 or 3. We've had 2 suicide bombers in a short period of time in the Middle East. We had the 2 embassies in Africa, in Kenya and in Tanzania, the attack 2 summers ago in the United States. But the notion that terrorists, either an organization or organizations, plural, should be able to mount a concerted effort against the United States in this way, causing in this instance so many casualties, in the instance of the trade tower, certainly so many casualties, is going to astound people in the political and military and intelligence establishment.
Absolutely. The notion that you could have multiple attacks like this, they had been planning for it, they had not seen it. This is a extraordinary escalation, one that they were predicting would happen, but no one would think that would happen this quickly.
Okay. John Miller?
I think...
let me just interrupt. I apologize again. We're now looking at a helicopter over the Pentagon. That makes perfect sense this morning. But given the fact that we're all sensitive to the presence of any aircraft, that was a helicopter that just flew across the screen. That is, and as we had at least one eyewitness said this was an attack on the Pentagon from the south. He described it quite confidently as resembling a commuter aircraft, which is to say smaller than a small private aircraft and not as large as a commercial jet. It may have been a prop jet. It may have been a jet, but it's a smaller version of the jets which so many people in so many middle-sized American cities are now accustomed to seeing.
In terms of the realm of terrorism, this is going to be a real first test, literally by fire, for the Bush administration. You recall, after the embassy bombings in East Africa, the Clinton administration waited about 10 days and launched a missile attack against the camps of Osama bin Laden, who they felt confident at that time they could say was responsible for it and who has since been charged in it. In this case, I think this ratchets up.
Excuse me. This is the Pentagon we're looking at now, according to my monitor. And again, it is hard to grasp what part of the building. We do not know if they're in the courtyard or outside, but you can see that a fairly considerable amount of damage has been done. We do not know whether these are offices or storage areas. The Pentagon is full of many thousands of people.
You're listening to live coverage of an apparent terrorist attack on the United States of America. Live coverage from ABC News. I'm Jim Hickey in New York, joined by my colleague Karen Chase. Just to recap now, there have been 3 apparent attacks that we know of. 2 in New York, 1 at the Pentagon in Washington.
Shortly before 9 o'clock Eastern Time this morning, a plane flew into one of the twin towers of the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan and exploded on impact. About 20 to 25 minutes later, as TV cameras from helicopters were rolling, a second aircraft flew into the second twin tower, the South Tower, and it too exploded on impact. About an hour after that, a third plane reportedly flew into the courtyard of the Pentagon, and it too exploded on impact. All three buildings are currently on fire. There are untold numbers of casualties. We have no idea how many casualties there are now, but thousands upon thousands of people work in both towers of the World Trade Center, and now there is only one tower of the World Trade Center. The South Tower has completely collapsed.
Terrorism at the World Trade Center. The latest update from WABC Radio News.
This is Bill Boyce along with Curtis Sliwa, Ron Kuby, Babita Hariani, and John Gambling. I think we're all stunned in here at what is beginning to sink in just over the last few minutes as to the magnitude and, of course, the collapse of one of the two World Trade Center towers is obviously devastating and monumental.
Yes, and in fact, we have on the line, as he's been all morning long, Commissioner Jerry Camerata of the City of New York, who was forced to leave the World Trade Center initially and was in the streets, I believe, when the South Tower collapsed. Are you there, Jerry?
Yeah, I'm here, Curtis.
Can you just describe for us what the scene was like and what it continues to be like with the collapse?
Well, it's no less as spectacular, dramatic, but in this case so sorrowful as when you see a stadium being blown up purposefully, floor after floor from the high floors down to the low, one at a time being blown up. And just to see that in the background of all of us having to run away from it, it's just absolutely horrific. And now, continually, as probably many of your listeners are actually seeing concurrently on television, just to see these people falling out of the upper floors, it's just beyond belief.
Now, Jerry, as you were evacuated along with people working with you, do you have any idea of how many people might have been taken out of both the towers?
I have no idea about the towers. We were next to the towers, and I understand in that building there could have been 50,000 people. These buildings are absolutely incredibly packed with people. I mean, now one has to suspect with one tower down for all of those that were on the lower floors trying to get down the stairs to what extent they may still have been in the building. With all of the panic, it's amazing how many people are helpful and how many people are trying to console those that are not taking this very, very well. But
Jerry, you mentioned that you said that when the South Tower collapsed, you looked as though to you that the floors were being blown out. Were they collapsing on their own, or were there actual explosions taking place?
It looked like there were explosions one after the other. Now, whether or not that was reality in the final analysis, that's the way it looked. It looked just as if a stadium was purposefully being imploded, one right after the other as the building started to come down. I tell you, our eyes were more on where we were going, not behind us, as to what was taking place.
Jerry, it looked like...
The debris right now is all the way up to Duane and beyond on all of the streets surrounding the World Trade Center.
So people who were standing around outside or emergency workers, they would have been, of course, in the line of the debris.
They could have been as well, and that came down so quickly. So anybody in that immediate area, I mean, we just don't know right now.
Well, now, Jerry Camerata, today is a primary day, an election day. I would think it behooves us just to cancel it because so many people can't even get an opportunity to vote, and we need the continuity of the service provided by the Giuliani administration to at least initially get us through this horrific tragedy that this city, no city in the United States has ever experienced before.
Well, I guess your point is well taken, Curtis. Right now, I just think about the people that are out on the street and the help we're trying to get them. We'll leave it up to the wisdom of the politicians to decide how they want to deal with that. But certainly, this administration continually demonstrates its ability to come together and to mobilize.
Jerry Camerata, what's the administration currently advising people to do? I know all across the city, people are hearing this, they're seeing this, their loved ones are at work or at school. Is there any advisory, any advice? Are you telling people to stay where they are, to go home?
Well, right now, I know my agency, the Department of Youth and Community Development, has been evacuated, and I understand all other city agencies in and around the downtown area have been evacuated. Now, to be evacuated evacuated and where one can go, that will be something else. Since all of the bridges and tunnels are closed right now, the best advice I can give if there is any evacuation from downtown, just simply walk as quickly and as carefully as you can and just keep walking uptown away from the center of the city. And I would move particularly to the west side, where probably you'd be least vulnerable right now. But that's just my best evaluation, and perhaps not the best of authorities.
Jerry, it looked like when the World Trade Center building, the South Tower, collapsed, that it may have brought down another smaller building near it. Do you know anything about that?
No, other than what I just briefly, as going into one of the shops here to get to the phone, saw it perhaps could have been the tower or the lesser building where OEM is, although I'm not sure. As you know, there's a connecting facade above the road between OEM building as well as the World Trade Center, and that looked like it had been damaged and it had fallen onto the street where many of the cars are.
Well, now, Jerry, Commissioner Jerry Camerata, with the emergency management building being evacuated because of the two tremendous explosions as a result of the airplane crashes into both towers, where are the vital services now that the city is providing being headquartered? Are they coming out of One Police Plaza?
I don't know, and again, I was only at OEM because of my role also as a member of the Board of Ed, trying to make sure that our schools down here were well protected and provided for. You'd have to determine that from the mayor's office, but I'm sure that is being coordinated without any difficulty and with great dispatch.
All right, well, Commissioner Jerry Camerata, if you can continue to kindly keep us updated as this continued tragedy unfolds.
If I also may add kindly that any of the children any of the parents that have children in our down the City Hall area schools, PS 234, Stuyvesant, and a couple of others, those children are safe. They are in the cafeteria. We have security there, and they are being cared for well. And the principal is available if need be.
Well, thank you very much for your updates, Commissioner Jerry Camerata of the City of New York. We'll be hearing from him in the future, also getting other updates from George Weber, who's down at the scene of the collapse of the South Tower of the World Trade Center.
You know, on a good day, this section of New York City is hard to access. In this situation, I just wonder what the emergency services are having to go through just to get even anywhere close to help anybody.
And I don't know if anybody, I'm sure you all caught it when Jerry said it, and we all had a gasp in here when Jerry estimated the number of people that were in the World Trade Center might have been as high as 50,000 people.
Oh, at least, absolutely so. And not to mention the buildings that surround that area downtown.
We are literally talking about a horrific attack on the United States of America. Earlier, someone compared it to Pearl Harbor. I don't know what the amount of death in Pearl Harbor was off the top of my head, but and we can't speculate now on what this might be. We won't know probably for days, but this is certainly rivaling that attack on the United States.
And as we kind of recap and look back at what's happened so far, air transportation throughout the entire United States has ceased, and it will be shut down for at least 7 hours. That's the latest. We believe that the President of the United States has left where he was in Sarasota, Florida, and gotten aboard Air Force One. The Congress has been moved to a secret location. All of the Pentagon has been attacked, and therefore I would assume that the military hierarchy have all been moved to some sort of bunker somewhere.
Of course.
Because this is, as you point out, Phil Boyce, an attack on the United States.
Right here in New York, all the bridges are shut down, the tunnels are shut down, you can't get in, you can't get out. The subways, I don't believe, are functioning.
That's right, they're not
The stock exchange has suspended trading.
NASDAQ just decided not to open at all.
The consequence of this is mind-boggling.
It is, and it's something that we will be talking about this for many years to come. And just to recap, and you guys helped me with this because it was all happening so fast. We first saw about 10 minutes till 9 when it looked like that something had happened at the World Trade Center.
On the North Tower, and there were early reports that a plane had crashed into the North Tower. That was on fire. Then at 9:03, we were all watching live coverage of that. Another plane, it looked like a jet, it looked like a large jet, crashed into the South Tower. We then heard word that a helicopter or some other vehicle had attacked or crashed into the Pentagon. The Pentagon was on fire, and then just a short while ago...
Well, we've had also, though, conflicting reports about an original attack that may have occurred at the White House. No confirmation on that. An attack possibly at the Capitol. No confirmation on that. But what we do know is clearly the Pentagon and the World Trade Center have taken direct hits. There's no question, and there are many, many injuries and possibly many, many deaths.
And it does appear that a very good likelihood that the 3 planes that all attacked these facilities were hijacked this morning. We had the report that 2 of them were hijacked from Boston this morning. One of them apparently an American Airlines plane, but that's about the extent of it. We haven't been able to get a confirmation on the other 2 planes, and in fact that information is a little bit sketchy, so we don't know for sure. But of course, all the airplanes now have been grounded, and all the airports have been shut down, and this whole country is under a terrorist attack, a terrorist advisory or warning, whatever you might want to call it, something we've never had in this country that I recall.
Well, we saw Phil Boyce, as was pointed out by the ABC TV news correspondent, 10 days after Osama bin Laden was successful in one of his attacks. The Clinton administration responded, and with that, there were the feeble attempts to get at him in his training bases, the Mujahideen training bases in Afghanistan. And remember, the missiles that we sent into that aspirin factory in the Sudan. This is going to require quite the stronger response from the G.W. Bush administration.
And I think probably everybody would agree with me when we say that if we know who is responsible, the strongest possible action should be taken, whether it be individuals, paramilitary organizations, small organizations, or nations. But of course, right now, there's absolutely no indication as to who is responsible for this.
And let me just say that we got an AP News alert from the Associated Press just a couple of minutes ago that at 10:23, that was about 4.5 minutes ago, a car bomb exploded outside the State Department. And that's all the information that we have right
at the State Department where?
In Washington, D.C.
Obviously, whatever happened here, it was extremely well coordinated, much better coordinated than any other attack in the United States or anywhere that I can think of worldwide had been coordinated in the past.
Well, we will be going to an ABC News update to get caught up on all the latest information. Is that at 30:30, guys? That'll be at 30 seconds past 10:30. This is WABC in New York and WEVD in New York. We are in continuous coverage of this tragic terrorist attack on the United States.
Well, in fact, John Gambling, you were speaking with the terrorist expert who said very directly that the person who has come out overtly and said that he would continue to attack the United States, both internally and externally, was Osama bin Laden. He couldn't even think of any other potential individuals who were involved.
And you're absolutely right. It's just...
We are watching a live shot now from Newscopter 7 of another building going down. Is that, could someone confirm for me?
Is that the other tower?
Is that the other tower? It looks like the second tower of the World Trade Center has now also collapsed. The second tower is now gone. There is a big plume of black smoke rising above.
That marks the landmark.
Guys, can we go to Channel 7? Are they, can we bring Channel 7 up and see what they're reporting? Let's go live to Channel 7, WABC.
In which all of this has taken place in such a short period of time. 8:45 until now at 10:29.
Nina Pineda, can you hear us? Are you on the line at all, Nina? Nina is just a few blocks from there. And we do not have her amidst the chaos. We have not heard from Joe Torres. This is just so tragic that it's sort of
almost
ridiculous to try to talk through this. It is so horrific.
Until today, the worst act of terrorism on American soil was until today, the worst act of terrorism on American soil. States as well.
Let's switch over to ABC network coverage with Peter Jennings. He is now showing a shot that looks like something out of Beirut. That's the only thing I can describe.
John Miller, very briefly, you said to us just a few minutes ago that this was their concern, that they thought after the first tower went that the second one was vulnerable.
There was constant intelligence that terrorist organizations, and specifically that financed by Osama bin Laden, was trying to mount another series of attacks against the United States. Of course, they thought of the symbolic targets. The most symbolic was the World Trade Center because it had been attacked yet not brought down. And it seems that those concerns that even caused the World Trade Center to hire a senior FBI counterterrorism official just weeks ago to try and beef up security have come home to roost. It's also interesting to say that there is no type of security
which would have prevented against this today. Well, that may not. I was going to say that may not all be able to be true because security operates in waves and concentric circles out around the world. Now we've lost the picture from there, so now we have it again. Well, wherever you are in the United States or in the world today, the landscape of New York City has just been changed. And one has to assume that thousands of lives have been extinguished.
You're listening to live coverage from ABC News. Tragedy unfolding in New York and in Washington, as Peter Jennings just described. The second of the two twin towers of the World Trade Center has now collapsed upon itself. We can see smoke and debris drifting out over New York Harbor, passing poignantly, I have to say, in front of the Statue of Liberty, Karen, as we watch the smoke drift out over the harbor. Thousands of people would work inside those twin towers every day. You can only assume that thousands of people were in there when the planes attacked the building. Unclear, Karen, how many people were able to get out between now and then, and that was about an hour and a half ago when the first plane hit the first tower.
That's correct, and as we've heard, we know that the two planes were both American Airlines flights. They carried a total of 150 people, 90 in one of the planes, 60 in the other, again felling both towers of the World Trade Center, changing the very landscape of Manhattan, and in what President Bush has called a terrorist attack, and in one that appears to be very coordinated. We also have a plane crash outside the Pentagon. We have some sort of explosion at the Capitol building, and a car bomb reported outside the State Department.
You're listening to live coverage from ABC News of these events as they continue to unfold. I'm Jim Hickey, New York, along with my colleague Karen Chase. Karen, I have to tell you, I'm almost speechless here. I covered the original bombing of the World Trade Center in 1993, and I recall during the trial of the people who were convicted of that bombing, one of them flew over, actually, in a helicopter when he was in custody, and he told the marshals that were with him, or the FBI agents, that looking down at the World Trade Center, he says, well, they still stand, and the man said, they wouldn't be had he had more money.
I also recall that during that trial, one of the architects, or one of the someone affiliated with the architects, testified that the buildings were fortified with these very strong beams that go right up the side of the building, and he said it would be virtually impossible to topple the towers. And yet, we look at the city that never sleeps, and there's a strange silence along with the smoke that's just wafting over the city.
We also have to say that there is tightened security all around the country in the major cities, Los Angeles, Chicago, Dallas, and in Washington. The White House, the Pentagon, the Capitol, the State Department have all been evacuated. Airports have been ordered shut down across the country by the FAA. Commercial airline flights that were in the air have been ordered to head to the nearest airport and land and stay there. Here in New York City, the crossings over the Hudson and under the Hudson River, the tunnels and bridges have all been shut down. This, if nothing else, and certainly it's not nothing else, but the terrorist attacks have brought, if not New York, much of the nation to a standstill this morning. And this accounting of the casualties, the accounting of the damage, will take months, if not years, to work out, Karen.
Yes, and indeed we did have one claim of responsibility by a Palestinian group. However, when that group was telephoned, the leaders of the group denied responsibility.
That's the DFLP, right?
That's correct. So we really have no clue at this point as to who may be responsible for it. No one has formally claimed responsibility and confirmed it.
You're listening to live coverage from ABC News. For those of you who have just joined us, we'd like to recap. Three airplanes have crashed into American landmarks this morning. Two planes into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan. The third plane into the courtyard of the Pentagon. Both Twin Towers in New York, both of them 110 stories tall, incredibly have disappeared. They have collapsed upon themselves into mountains of rubble, a monstrous pile of cloud of smoke and debris drifting out now over Manhattan and over New York Harbor. At the Pentagon, fires continue to burn. Smoke continues to float out over Washington. There was a report of some kind of incident at the Capitol. We're unclear about that. And a report of a car bomb outside the State Department. However, we do not know the extent of that. All these events are breaking even as we speak. There's a great deal of confusion between here and New York. President Bush, who was in Florida, has canceled his Florida trip where he was pushing his education program. He's headed back to Washington. Secretary of State Powell has shortened his trip in Peru. He is also on his way back to Washington.
And indeed, before President Bush got back on Air Force One, security did a second sweep as a precaution before the president boarded the plane. Again, the president has called it a terrorist attack. And part of the reason for the confusion between Washington and New York is that many of our colleagues who are in those buildings, in the Pentagon, in the Capitol building, and even in the White House, were hurriedly evacuated. So they can't even tell us what's going on in some cases because they've been hurried out of the buildings.
Earlier, we talked to an eyewitness, Brian Lutz, who was in a building near the World Trade Center. He was on the upper floors of one of those skyscrapers in his office building. And although, Karen, he was inside the building, he said he could feel the heat from the explosion when the planes crashed into the buildings and blew up in a huge fireball upon impact. He could actually feel the heat through his windows in the building. Two of the planes, are we clear yet? We don't know if the third plane yet was hijacked, or where it was hijacked from.
No, but we do know that when it did crash at the Pentagon, it crashed on a helicopter landing pad. It did not land in the courtyard. It landed on a helicopter landing pad, which is just outside the Pentagon. It's just on the edge of the Pentagon building, close to the highway. And it caused a very smoky fire. There's also, there was smoke reported at there, and there we are watching live coverage of it on television. The smoke is still pouring out of the Pentagon building. So we have, and that is a huge building as well. And our colleagues were evacuated from there as well. So
and we can also see now pictures of firefighters in New York just wandering around now because there's virtually little more they can do. However, the firemen, the firefighters, and the civilians are all covered in white, chalky dust. They are just wandering around, it appears, in a daze. No fires to put out anymore. The buildings are gone.
And that's correct. We should also point out that the two planes hit the buildings probably an hour and a half ago. Is that correct? And it took about an hour for the first one to fall down, and then the second one came down in a huge cloud of smoke and ash. And one of our producers was in the dust was in among those being herded away hurriedly from the first one as it disintegrated into the ground. And she said she couldn't see her hand in front of her face, and it was quite terrifying.
At the risk of sounding trite, Karen, we're looking at a picture now that no Hollywood producer or director could conceive. A picture of Lower Manhattan from across the harbor, taken from Staten Island, and all of Lower Manhattan is obscured by smoke and dust. It is a surreal picture. It looks unreal.
As a matter of fact, some of the people that I spoke to on the street said they thought it was a movie. It didn't seem real to them. They thought that someone was, pulling some sort of a prank, or this was a movie stunt or a publicity stunt, and they still couldn't let it sink in. They still couldn't believe it was happening, and I think a lot of people in the city feel that way. It's hard to believe what you're seeing.
It's incredible. Now the firemen, there are two firemen hugging each other. There's quite nothing more for them to do. A third one is on the ground behind them, retching and coughing because of all this smoke and debris. Now we're getting a report from the Associated Press that a large plane or multiple large plane crashes in western Pennsylvania. We're getting this from officials at Somerset County Airport in Pennsylvania. We know nothing more about that. It's large plane crashes in Pennsylvania. No idea whether this is tied in to what is happening here this morning.
Is this one large plane that's crashed or several large planes?
Well, that is unclear at the moment. I'm going to try to find out a little more about that. But the only line we have now, large plane crashes, rather a large plane crashes rather than multiple large plane crashes in western Pennsylvania. If this is indeed connected to what has happened here this morning, it is quite clear that the United States is under attack, Karen.
That's correct. We do know that the two planes that crashed into the World Trade Center tower were You're listening to live coverage from ABC News.
This is continuous coverage of the attack on the World Trade Center from WABC Radio News. This is WABC New York.
You're listening to live coverage from ABC News. Of course, what's been happening all around the country. We're in a terrible state of alert after both of the towers of the World Trade Center here in New York City collapsed after apparent terrorist attacks. We have finally on the line WABC's George Weber, who is live at the scene. How are you?
Are you there?
Good morning.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I am.
We've been worried to death about you.
I was very close to the first collapse of the first tower, maybe 3 blocks away, and it was just this terrible rumbling sound. It sounded like a terrible explosion, almost like an atomic warhead going off, God forbid. And the next thing I know, I look up, and there is this giant cloud of smoke and debris, and it is making a funnel all the way down the street, and there is this mad rush from thousands of people who had flooded into the streets, almost stampede-like. But the one thing that I took note of was how everyone came together, picking other people up off the street and helping them along the way to get them to safety as people were ducking into buildings and the like, not knowing what was happening. Then a rumor had come across that another plane was heading that way, but indeed what it was a fighter jet, an Air Force fighter jet, which had been circling the area in a protective move, we understand. And then I was forced to evacuate the area, and I'm now probably a good 20, 25 blocks back. Like thousands of others, they've evacuated tens of thousands of people from that area, and we are all standing back here mesmerized like everyone else, looking on to absolutely nothing, just what a lot of people have been able to see out their windows or on television, and that's that big, giant ball of smoke that just lays over downtown New York with the 2 biggest structures missing.
George, John Gambling, when you were standing 3 blocks before the first tower collapsed, were there still people evacuating those buildings, or had that pretty much been accomplished by then?
You know, it's uncertain at this point, but what I can tell you is that they had set up a perimeter around it, but there were tons of rescue crews very close into that, and I'm going to suspect many perished when that came down. I mean, there were, if I was 3 blocks close, you can only imagine now the rescue crews, and I would imagine that rescue was still going on. They weren't allowing the media that close to the scene, so...
What was it like when the second building came down?
I saw that myself. That was the most amazing thing. I had ducked into a grocery store to get some quarters, and the next thing I know, I didn't hear anything, and people start screaming, and I see it just collapsing down, debris falling, and then again, a giant plume of smoke, and then that whooshing right down the streets as people were once again running. And I'll tell you this right now, the communication system is all screwed up, and I've got a line of people behind me wanting to use this payphone who want to call their friends and their loved ones and their relatives, so I'm going to have to periodically check in with you here as I'm walking through the neighborhood.
George, I've never been more happy to hear your voice.
Well, God bless you, Phil, and let me tell you, I can say this, this is probably the most frightening thing I've ever been through in my life.
Well, for all of us, you got to the scene so quickly. You were on the air with us about 9:20, and we had not heard from you in now about an hour and 15 minutes. And, you know, we were very concerned for you because we knew, you know, you're a reporter. Your job is to get there and get on live.
Yeah, and I have a very good friend who works on the 100th floor, and God bless him.
You know, I think, George, a lot of people are feeling that way. A lot of people I've heard in the newsroom talking about friends and family that worked in one of the towers, and they're just, you know, trying to come to grips with what has happened. So much has happened.
Thanks, George. You get back to us as soon as you can.
You got it.
Well, I don't know if any of you have had the opportunity to actually walk the flights of steps of the World Trade Center in a normal fashion, as I have. It takes forever.
Right.
You can imagine no elevator service, probably electricity knocked out, and the only method of getting to the bottom there is through those large stairwells there. Obviously, the workers there have trained ever since the first blast in 1993. But how can you get that many people out of such a large building so quickly?
Train for this or to prepare.
And then the emergency service personnel, you know, the firefighters, you know, all the emergency service personnel, the cops and everyone else in the building, downstairs, right at the base of the building. And some of them must be so terribly injured, and some must have perished, but they were definitely risking everything on the front lines there, no question about it.
We're told that all the federal buildings have been evacuated, and that must be throughout the country. Definitely here in New York and throughout the country, they're evacuating all the federal buildings.
And just to quickly recap, not only that, but all of the airports in the country have been shut down. This was because of reports of hijacking of several of these planes that crashed into the World Trade Center. All of the transportation facilities getting onto the subways, the train stations,
the Lincoln, the Holland, the
New Jersey Transit, LIRR, you name it. You cannot get onto Manhattan, and you cannot get off of the island.
Talk about evacuating here in the heart of Manhattan, evacuating people to where?
To where?
Where do we go, and how do we get there?
And we're told now that anybody who has loved ones perhaps coming in on transatlantic flights, they are being diverted to Canada. So you'll probably just have to sit tight and wait to find out where they landed and, what's going to happen from there. It might be a few days.
The government of the United States has been evacuated as well to areas that are pre-planned for such an attack as this. The Congress was in session, was in the Capitol. There was an attack of some sort on the U.S. Capitol. They have been moved to a secret location. The White House has been evacuated. The president was in Sarasota, Florida, addressing an organization earlier this morning. We believe, from everything that we've heard and seen, that he is probably aboard Air Force One at the moment, and they again have procedures to cover situations.
Well, in fact, during the Eisenhower administration, they spent gazillions of dollars to build a huge bunker system so that Congress could actually be in session and continue deep underneath the hills of West Virginia.
West Virginia, underneath the
hotel. But you know what, guys? When we heard of that, and we've all heard about that, we laughed because we thought, well, first of all, that was thought of during the Cold War when we thought there might be a nuclear attack on this country. Whoever thought that that would have to be used because of a terrorist attack?
My guess is that the Pentagon has been evacuated as well, that the senior military officials are probably aboard that Airborne Command Center, which is a giant 747. There are actually two of those. My guess is that they are both airborne at this point, probably as well, just waiting to assess the situation and control the infrastructure of an entire country, and you can expand it to the world, because the implications of what has taken place in the last 2.5 hours will be felt probably forever in one way or another.
And I would have to think, we think of a typical hijacking in which the pilot is being told to go in a certain direction. I cannot imagine for the life of me if these were two separate airplanes hijacked from Boston Logan Airport, that the pilots would actually crash into the building. There may well have been the possibility that the hijackers themselves were proficient in guiding a plane, and they themselves decided to crash the airplanes that they had hijacked into that building. I just can't imagine pilots doing that under any circumstance.
Well, of course not. They would have had to have been removed from the seat by someone or someone's, and they would have had to take over the airplane, because as we watched the video of that second plane, which we understand was a 767 American Airlines out of Boston, fly directly at 300 and some odd miles an hour into that building, no pilot would do that. He would veer the plane. He would avoid that at his own peril.
Now. I mean, everyone knows this is a terrorist attack. We just don't know who. Obviously, we want to blame somebody, and Ron, of course, reminds us all, don't jump to judgment.
Right. We need to figure out, obviously, who's responsible, and certainly we will support the swiftest possible and strongest possible punishment.
And put aside
once we know
our political differences.
Course, right.
This is where Democrats and Republicans must come together. I should say, suspend the elections today, and let's follow the guidance of the president, of the mayor, and the other authorities who are in charge of this situation. We will be going, though, to our status report, as we have all morning long. We'll continue with our coverage afterwards. Don't go anywhere. Stay right here on WABC to get your updates.
America under attack. Our coverage continues from WABC Radio News. This is WABC, New York City.
New York City's World Trade Center has been reduced to a pile of rubble. The Twin Towers collapsed after being struck by two planes in terrorist attacks this morning.
So lots of smoke, and then the next thing I heard an explosion, and the building from the top, the south building, just crumbled. Just completely went down. I saw it. It's hard to see all the pieces, but you could see it tipping over and just crashing to the ground.
She saw the first tower go down. The second one went down not long after that. It was the start of a series of mind-boggling incidents, including a plane crash into the Pentagon and a bombing at the State Department. Outside the White House, ABC's Claire Shipman.
The entire area around the White House has been completely evacuated. It's very quiet. The police seem tense. They're carrying automatic weapons. We've also seen a couple of what appear to be fighter jets overhead. Everybody in this area has been sent home from all major government offices. It's a reverse commute. The highways, we're told, are just jammed.
Daria Aldinger, ABC News.
America under attack. Our coverage continues from WABC Radio News. This is WABC, New York City.
You're listening to live coverage there from ABC News. This is Babita Hariani in the WABC newsroom, and let me just recap for you what has happened in the last couple of hours. We had a plane crash into the tower of the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan shortly before 9 o'clock this morning, about 8:50, and then a second plane crashed into the second tower of the World Trade Center just after 9 a.m. And President Bush in Sarasota, Florida, he called the crash an apparent terrorist attack and a national tragedy. Then we had an aircraft crash near the Pentagon, just outside of Washington, D.C., in Northern Virginia, about a half hour after the attacks here in New York. Government buildings in Washington, including the Capitol, the White House, they're evacuated with officials citing a credible threat of a terrorist attack. The Federal Aviation Administration has shut down all aircraft takeoffs nationwide. Then shortly after 10 o'clock, one World Trade Center tower in New York collapsed about an hour after being hit by that plane. American Airlines says one of the planes that crashed into the Trade Center was American Airlines Flight 11, hijacked after takeoff from Boston en route to Los Angeles. Now, senior law enforcement officials say a car bomb exploded outside the State Department in Washington, D.C., and we know that the financial markets have suspended trading. The second tower, then, of the World Trade Center collapsed at 10:28 this morning.
And Babita, of course, right now we know of the 3 plane attacks.
Right.
One on the first World Trade Center, another on the second World Trade Center, the third on the Pentagon, which occurred about 30 minutes later.
That's correct.
We now, CNN's reporting that a 60-foot section of the Pentagon has collapsed. That plane, apparently they say, looked like a commuter plane, a smaller plane.
Okay.
One of the planes that hit the World Trade Center was a 767, which is one of the big ones.
That's what we
it's interesting here that these buildings are collapsing. Now, it's very unusual, especially the Pentagon, which is not 110 stories tall. It's only, I think, maybe 5 or 6. And to have these buildings in very short order collapse almost says to me that there were other explosives of some sort, some other events taking place here.
Probably not at the Pentagon, though, John, because I don't know how they'd get explosives.
No, in the planes. I'm suggesting
that
the planes were carrying something besides that, and they were until they caught fire, they didn't explode. There's also a report right now from CNN that a 747 has crashed in Pennsylvania, in western Pennsylvania. That's
John,
all we have at the moment on that.
I also have an unconfirmed report right now that another plane is headed towards the Pentagon right at this moment, unconfirmed, and that all the F-16s
scrambled the planes.
Scrambled.
Well, just to sort of buttress your point of view, John Gambling, not knowing that, in fact, those planes that were hijacked had extra explosives, there was a B-25 Mitchell bomber which crashed into the Empire State Building here on the 100th floor. Now, imagine, a military bomber in fog, and they didn't have the apparatus back then to be able to reach up 100 floors. It did not cause the Empire State Building to collapse.
And this took hardly any time at all. It took less than 45 minutes after these planes flew into the World Trade Center for the entire building to collapse.
Right, and we don't have any word at this point as to casualties, number of casualties, the degree.
They're going to be incomprehensible.
Personnel were injured or killed in the course of affecting the rescue.
An adjacent building just could have housed as many as 50,000. So those buildings alone could have been a couple of 100,000 apiece.
We have Steve Sandberg standing by on 9th Avenue. Steve?
Yes, George, how are you?
It's Phil. What do you say?
Well, Bill, we just got across the river, the Hudson River. We actually, myself and a few members of the press, we were tied up on the New Jersey side trying to get in. We were on the last ferry boat across, and then the Coast Guard turned all boats across, and we had to go back to New Jersey. We commandeered a private vessel who got us across. He's a very nice guy. Once we got over here, as we were on the boat across on the Hudson River, we saw the second Twin Tower go down. Just billowing smoke, a cloud of smoke, almost Hiroshima-like, if you know the funnel cloud going up, and all of Lower Manhattan was just engulfed with smoke and debris. There were frightening moments, everybody looking, people on the ferry side, on the New Jersey side of the ferry terminal, the New York Waterway terminal, tears, just scary moments as everybody watched, and saw the towers go down. And that's where we stand now. We're just back on the New York side. We're trying to reconvene, find out what's going on. Just got word from the mayor's office. There was a Q&A scheduled. That has been now has been postponed, and we'll get word from the mayor as soon as we can.
Thank you, Steve.
All right,
Thanks
Steve,
for calling
I
us.
was just thinking as Steve was speaking that I think it's unusual that we haven't heard
From Mayor Giuliani.
from the
Right.
mayor. We haven't heard from anybody except the president just before it appeared that he was going to be aboard Air Force One. But I'm surprised we have not heard from the governor. We have not heard from anybody with just sort of a calming word, no specifics, but just
Well,
sort of
I suppose given an attack, a tragedy of this magnitude, probably the most important thing is to come on with accurate information. I don't know that they have it yet at this point.
Well, I'm sure they don't.
They're trying to begin to get a handle on the death, the destruction, the casualties.
Well, we've only heard from President Bush saying he had spoken to Governor Pataki
right.
and other officials here in New York, but, certainly we've heard no reports from them, and there are no bulletins coming out of any
Manhattan,
statements at
if
this
you're
point.
just tuning in, is completely locked down. The bridges are closed, the tunnels are closed, the subways aren't running. All federal buildings have been evacuated.
people are wandering the streets.
I just got a report that officials at a Somerset County airport, that was in the Pennsylvania, that went down as well, right by Pittsburgh.
The 747 that's running. Well, Sean reported that. But it's interesting because, remember, the city's entire effort at managing any kind of emergencies was then based right near the World Trade Center in the building next door, which, when we talked to Commissioner Jerry Camerata of the city of New York, they were ordered to evacuate. So if, in fact, they have lost their primary means of control of emergency services, I'm sure they're either retreating back to One Police Plaza, which is the old facility where all emergency management took place, and sort of trying to regroup, because it must be just horrific trying to get any details out there that you can then convey to the citizens of our city and throughout our tri-state area.
One of the things people want to know is what they can do. We just heard a report that St. Vincent's Hospital down in Greenwich Village there is looking for blood donors, so people who are in a position in the vicinity of St. Vincent's, don't everybody start running down to St. Vincent's. There'll be enough local hospitals needing blood, but people down there in the vicinity, in Greenwich Village, could make it over
Could
there.
we assume, Ron, that probably any of the hospitals on Manhattan could use your blood?
That's probably.
I would say any in the area. I'm sure because, if the hospitals here are overwhelmed, they're going to,
There's no question they're going to need it. So if you're looking for something to do, go to the hospital and
And I'll
offer.
tell you, we just had a statement come from the Taliban in Afghanistan. They've denied any involvement with any of these terrorist attacks. The Taliban has been sheltering.
Pardon me if we just put a pin in that for the time.
I'm just reporting to you the statement that has come across.
By the way, we are in continuous coverage on both of our AM 50,000 watt radio stations. WEVD New York, which is 1050 ESPN, has joined our coverage now for the last couple of hours. And, of course, 77 WABC. We are continuing our live continuous coverage. We will stay with it here as long as we deem necessary. We have talked to Sean Hannity. He will be on live at 3 o'clock this afternoon from a studio we've secured on Long Island. He cannot get onto the island of Manhattan, but his crew is there with him, and he will be live at 3 o'clock this afternoon.
And when we come back from our national update from around the country, particularly the problems in Washington as a result of a plane crash in the Pentagon, and our problems here as a result of the collapse of both towers of the World Trade Center, we'll get an update from the Commissioner of New York City, Jerry Camerata, who has kept us updated as to all the events. So you want to stay here on WABC. We've got this covered down at the World Trade Center. We've got this covered nationally. And we'll give you the updates virtually on the 15 and a half hour marks from our national news desk. And when we come back, Ron, you are an expert in this area about terrorists. Love to hear your take on this.
America under attack. Our coverage continues from WABC Radio News. This is WABC, New York City.
From ABC News, I'm Doug Limerick. A second day of infamy in this country. Terrorist attacks in New York and Washington. Planes have crashed into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center. The 110-story towers have now collapsed. Here's ABC's Ruth Davis.
I'm looking up at the sky. A little while ago, there were 2 towers up there burning. Right now, I don't know how much of the other one is missing because I cannot see it. I cannot see any part of it. The streets are covered with an eighth of an inch of gray ash. There's debris everywhere. There are people, cops, construction people, the few people, the FBI, the few people who are left out on the street are standing around gawking up at this unbelievable sight in the sky.
At least one of the planes had crashed into the World Center towers before they collapsed, an American Airlines 767, Flight 11 from Boston to Los Angeles. It had been hijacked before it crashed into the World Trade Center tower. Then shortly thereafter, a plane crashed into the Pentagon. ABC's John McWethy.
The Pentagon side by the heliport is badly charred. It appears the plane, a small plane, came in at a very low level of attack heading north. It clipped several light poles on the way in, and then apparently exploded right at the base of the Pentagon by the side of the helipad. They are evacuating everyone from within a quarter of a mile of the Pentagon.
Word that a section of the Pentagon has now collapsed. An explosion also reported at the U.S. Capitol. No new information on that blast. There's now a report a large plane has crashed in western Pennsylvania, about 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh. The FAA has shut down all flights across the country. Here live, ABC's Vic Ratner.
And, Doug, federal authorities have closed all airports in the Washington and New York area. Flights coming into the United States from Europe being diverted to Canada. In Washington, all the major buildings, the White House, the Treasury Department, the Capitol, the State Department, evacuated and employees sent home, Doug.
ABC's Vic Ratner live. More in a minute. You're listening to ABC News.
America under attack. Our coverage continues from WABC Radio News. This is WABC, New York City.
Good morning. This is Babita Hariani in the WABC newsroom at 11:02. We've had a whole number of things happen in the last couple of hours. We had planes, two separate planes crash into each of the World Trade Center towers. Both those towers have collapsed. And we also had a plane crash into the Pentagon. We will go right now to WABC's George Weber, who is live nearby the scene down in lower Manhattan. George, can you tell us what has been happening since we last spoke to you?
Well, I can tell you this, that certainly the panic part of it has subsided now that we know that those buildings are gone. And believe me, it was a scary sight as we watched them in flames. And then myself, personally, watching the second tower come down, while I was probably about 20 blocks away, I had only been 3 blocks away when the first tower collapsed, and I quite frankly, I didn't even want to look up there. I was on a side block, and then I heard this incredible explosion and this rumbling sound, and then this giant plume of smoke that billowed up high into the air and then came down each of the side streets going from south to north as a stampede of people came running. Things have calmed now, and what you find in these neighborhoods here in downtown New York are people gathering around cars where the radios are on full blast, listening to radio stations, trying to find out what's going on, and people walking around the streets, many of them angry, many of them, quite frankly, saddened by the thought of a terrorist attack on the United States again. And what we're also finding is a confusion factor. A lot of people obviously not knowing who got out of the World Trade Centers, who got out of the buildings that were near the World Trade Centers when they came tumbling down. So it is a frantic attack, and I have to tell you that each time I do these reports, I have to make them fairly quick because certainly there are a lot of people who are concerned about their loved ones who are standing in long lines, very much like myself, to make these phone calls. So, again, I think at this point they've evacuated from at least Canal Street south, and it appears as if they might be trying to evacuate a little bit more. There's also another very eerie sound, and I don't know if you can hear that behind me. It's the sound of what is apparently an Air Force jet. It's one of several that have been flying around this area for the past couple of hours ever since the first tower went down, Babita.
All right, George, thank you so much. And now we're also
4 minutes after the hour of 11, as we have all morning long since the first aircraft crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. We're going to Commissioner of the City of New York, Jerry Camerata. Jerry, where are you at this particular point?
Curtis, I just got over to William Street here, and as I'm listening to the reports that's coming over your airways, it's exactly as your people have been reporting. It's amazing how many stores have opened up their doors, the amount of water and any kind of beverage taken out. Down here at downtown Beekman Hospital, staff is outside giving face masks out in order to help the people get through the debris. It is truly like a volcano with the ash coming down. Every street, every building is just completely glossed over with at least a quarter of an inch, if not more, of ash. It's just going to take a long time to take care of this.
Well, Commissioner Jerry Camarada, as you had mentioned, New York City's Board of Election has canceled today's primary election. Because of the emergency crisis, people were advised stay home. There's no need to rush out to the polls. And this is a time where political differences are being put aside and everyone is coalescing around the mayor. Now, Jerry, we've not heard from the mayor or the governor locally to advise us as to what's taking place. Do you know when we'll get probably our first public advisory from either of our elected officials?
Well, I hate to say this because it's a competition, but New York won. As I just walked into my office, I just had a news brief by the mayor indicating he wants everybody that is downtown to immediately proceed with caution uptown, above Canal Street, and just keep walking north with calm.
Now, when you look out your window of your office, because it overlooks what used to be the placement of the two World Trade Center buildings, do you actually see the United States aircraft hovering above, making sort of the circles and the loop-de-loops in defense of that area of our city?
Curtis, I cannot see more than 300 to 400 feet outside of my window right now. Every street looks like there was an absolute disaster. You can't even determine what cars are under all of the ash. It is just one blanket of this mass wall of white. And this is going to be around a long, long time.
Now, Jerry, you had originally told us when John Gambling had asked you, when you saw one of the towers collapse, that you felt that it was almost as if a series of explosions were going off simultaneously.
That was my perception as I was immediately running away from that, and I was only about 3 blocks from the explosion when that happened. It was flashes of fire, window after window, starting from the upper floors, working their way down. After 4, 5, 6 floors, seeing that, I didn't even turn around to see any more of that. I was just running out.
Understood.
So just to be clear, the mayor has requested that everybody south of Canal Street move north of Canal Street on foot in a non-panicked mode. Don't try to come into the city. Stay at work if you're at work. Stay at home if you're at home.
Yeah, quite frankly, you just could not breathe outside in the air now downtown without needing to find your way to the emergency room. I did see the bridge open, the Brooklyn Bridge especially, open for pedestrians only, and they were walking them over the bridge as expeditiously as they could.
Can we go to the Channel 7 live feed right now?
Because our truck is full of dust. That's exactly how much dust we're talking about. Our deck is not working. However, I can tell you, we had a woman sitting in our live truck earlier who was literally covered in blood from her toes to her head. She was sitting in our truck filled with dust. She says she was actually on the 82nd. In fact, we just heard another explosion. We just heard another explosion a moment ago. So we're going to stay here as long as we can, but as soon as it becomes dangerous, of course, we will move. Let me tell you a little more about this woman. She was sitting in our truck, covered in blood, said she was on the 82nd floor. As soon as they heard that first plane come in, they started running down. It was clear until the 70th floor, but then the problem was a jam inside the stairwell. They ran down below the promenade where all the shopping centers and all the shopping stores are, and then they were able to run. Still, police having a hard time evacuating the whole area. You can see there are many people around, but the streets are jammed now with emergency vehicles. I can't hear you that well right now. I'm going to try to take this here.
This is a Channel 7 reporter who's on the scene there at the World Trade Center.
And it's not 9 minutes after the hour of 11. And just to take off on what you have thought, John Gambling, I'm now remembering when the World Trade Center was constructed during Governor Rockefeller's reign, the specifications were that it could withstand a normal airliner crashing into the facility based on what had taken place at the Empire State Building. And what we saw transpire in just an hour and a half was a complete collapse of both towers, which would almost imply that there were other elements possibly on that plane to speed up that process.
The other thing that leads me to that speculation is that at the Pentagon, the crash of the airplane there, they say it crashed on the helipad, which is outside the perimeter of the Pentagon, between the Pentagon and the roadway there, which I'm not sure exactly which one it is, but that Pentagon building collapsed as well.
About a 60-foot section of it, not a very large section.
No, but it's not a very large building, so it does not have the vertical pressure down like the World Trade Center.
Do we know if that commuter plane that hit there, did it actually hit the side of the Pentagon?
Well, I would assume that it did in one way or another, but again, the quick collapse here seems unusual, but this is only speculation.
It's difficult for us to know because that whole air, the air around that area has been sealed off. Obviously, the military has now scrambled their jets, and there's no aircraft allowed to fly right now. In fact, the television news helicopters are even grounded right now.
Now, Ron Kuby, assuming that it was the active terrorists and possibly those from the Middle East, maybe taking a page out in the 1993 World Trade Center blast, whether it was Salome who drove that Ryder truck in, what goes on in the minds of these people who would plot this and plan this, and the justification of taking so many lives of really innocent people who are not at all involved in the decision-making as to whether Israel is a favored nation or not a favored nation?
Well, I remember back in the sort of the sun of World Trade Center terrorism trial back in 1995. This was the plot to blow up the Lincoln Tunnel, the Holland Tunnel, the George Washington Bridge, the UN. It's supposed to be a synchronized attack back in 1995. Folks were arrested, and the plot didn't go forward. But we were actually, as lawyers, we were able to listen to the tapes of the co-conspirators, because there was an agent inside, listen to the tapes of the co-conspirators discuss this very thing, discuss in very chilling detail, planting a bomb inside the Holland Tunnel and detonating it. And the discussions, obviously, the individual who detonated it probably wouldn't be able to get away. And there was a big discussion on tape, well, what happens if we kill Muslims? And the consensus of the terrorists who were discussing this was, well, that's unfortunate, but they'll go to heaven. They'll sit at the right hand of Allah, and this is a necessary action in order to strike at what they perceive to be a legitimate target. So when I think you're imbued with that sort of religious zealotry, no matter what religion you happen to be, it no longer matters how many innocent people you kill as long as you strike at the quote-unquote guilty people.
And the ultimate goal here, if I'm not mistaken, is to create fear, not so much the fear of the attack itself, which will subside, but it's the fear of a repeated attack.
Well, I don't, again, and I'm speculating as to who's responsible, but if it is Islamists, I don't know that there's some sort of ultimate long-term strategic goal that by doing A, B, and C, therefore we will achieve the ultimate goal of whatever it is. I think it's a much more atavistic response, a desire to strike at and to harm those who you believe have wronged you, and with the religious imprimatur that you have under those circumstances, it's easy to justify morally.
All right, now there are many military targets, and Osama bin Laden's agents have taken responsibility for the bombing of the USS Cole in Yemen, still unsolved, when a small craft came alongside and essentially detonated itself and took many of our servicemen and servicewomen with it by blowing an entire crater hole out of the side of that battleship. But in this case, these are not military targets. These are not places where there is any kind of military personnel or officers.
I'm not being glib about this, but that's why we call them terrorists. There's no legitimate military target. There's no get the U.S. presence out of Yemen, therefore we're going to attack a U.S. military installation in Yemen. There's a much greater sense of let us strike deeply at the heart of those people who have wronged us.
Which they certainly have done. You cannot get any more deeper in the heart of the United States than what has been accomplished in less than 1 hour. It's hard to even comprehend that in 1 hour, the White House was attacked, the Pentagon was attacked, the Capitol, the State Department, and the essence, the icon of American business, the World Trade Centers and New York City.
Now, I would think with our ability technologically to track almost everything that moves, you can even go to a map setting now in which you can find your very own house listed on the map. You can see an actual aerial photograph of your house. That we cannot pinpoint or target Osama bin Laden. This is beyond me.
Well, I think at this point, if it's determined that Osama bin Laden is responsible, I think that issue, becomes sort of axiomatic, because I think most of Afghanistan will soon be dealt with in a manner that's fairly
This is
serious.
your prediction.
That's my prediction. If, in fact, Osama bin Laden is responsible, I think that there would be a broad national consensus to strike very deeply, not just at the individuals, but at the nations or nation-states that are giving them protection.
But that brings up a very good point, Ron. If this was a foreign country that was attacking the United States, we'd have our military probably by this afternoon flying over there to drop our bombs. But what do you do? What do you do? How can you retaliate for this?
Well, and sort of the deeper problem is, and I hesitate to say this at this time of national emergency, but they've won by virtue of this attack.
Correct.
No matter what we do after this.
Well, the score is certainly in their favor.
Whether we turn the whole of Afghanistan into a sheet of nuclear glass, which, quite frankly, I don't know that I'd oppose right now, they've still won because they've shown the ability to create mammoth destruction, incalculable destruction in the heart of the United States. And whatever this earlier Trade Center bombing did, it killed relatively few people, killed 6 people. The Murrah building, 168 people. This is destruction on the scale of wartime.
We've never seen this kind of destruction.
Right. Also, the numbers involved to pull this off. I mean, this is not 4 or 5 people involved here. This is, maybe dozens and dozens, maybe as many as 100 people to pull something like this off.
But this would also indicate that when our Kenyan embassy was blasted off of its foundations, when our other African embassy was blasted off of its foundations, there was no proper response from our government. As you know, 10 days later, under the cover of Monica Lewinsky and that whole sword affair, we sent these missiles deep into Afghanistan, did absolutely no damage to Osama bin Laden and his Mujahideen fighters, and then we blew up an aspirin factory in the Sudan, and then that was it.
I can assure you that that's not going to be the case this time.
Right, although I have to say, striking back at people who were not involved doesn't really advance anybody's cause of revenge, retribution, or justice. And it's the problem here. How do you find out who's accountable and who's responsible?
Right, but if you have someone who's come on international television, on the BBC, on CNN, and acknowledged that he is the mastermind of reaching out to strangle the evil Satan of America and the little Satan of Israel, why shouldn't we take him to his word? He is the one who publicly defies us and says, yes, I will strike at your heart. I will use every method, every dollar I have. Well,
Curtis, if we struck at everybody in the world who says we want to destroy the United States of America, we just open the atlas.
Well, who are you talking about? Osama bin Laden?
Oh, absolutely.
Well, why? Look, we've known about this guy for 2 years, more. Well, we haven't done it yet.
Well, we can track an animal's movement through the Kalahari Desert, right?
And if we did take him out, do we believe that there's not another guy that would be in his place?
Well, we do know that he's the mastermind, Phil. We do know that he's financially enabled so many of these terrorists to continue out in their negative and killing activity around the world.
Right, but what we don't want to do, I think, is to sort of fall into the type of downward violence spiral that characterizes the Middle East, where there's an attack and retribution for the retribution and revenge for the attack. Whatever has to happen here has to be some stroke that's calculated not simply to inflict pain or punishment or retribution on those that did this, but to make sure that neither they nor anybody else can ever do this again.
You actually don't want to strike at the heart of where these terrorists are.
I don't know who, Curtis, I don't know who these terrorists are.
Ron,
I don't know who did this. I dearly would love to find out, and believe me, as soon as we find out, I will join you in playing the Star-Spangled Banner as American fighter jets.
At the risk of being the moderator here, which I don't normally like to do between you guys.
Yes, Phil.
Let's not turn it into a talk show yet. Mm-hmm. We still have breaking news.
No, you're right.
And let's, but what you guys are doing is the very thing that everybody right now is doing, is saying, A, what do we do? And B,
how do we do it?
How do we do it? And another question, what do they want? What do they want?
I think they want us dead, Phil. I think that if anything was abundantly clear now, they want us dead, which is not something we can give them.
They're not going to kill all of us. There's 289 million of us.
Right.
Anyway, we're going to take an ABC News update.
Right, remember, as Ron has said, in their minds, should they die in this holiest of all missions, they go right to the side of Allah. They end up with Vestal virgins. They fornicate. They enjoy themselves in perpetuity.
Which is, right now, I just can't comprehend any of it. But we are in continuous coverage here on WABC 770, the most listened to news talk station in America, and we are also on WAVD New York 1050 ESPN, which has joined us in a simulcast. And we are going to get the latest in the story. A number of things have happened since the top of the hour, and we'll go to ABC News.
America under attack. Our coverage continues from WABC Radio News. This is WABC, New York City.
The World Trade Center in New York City is gone. It collapsed. This after 2 planes crashed into each tower minutes apart of each other. An attack President Bush characterizes as being an apparent terrorist hit. New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani says there's been a horrendous number of lives lost. Another plane has crashed into the Pentagon, collapsing part of that building. And a 747 has crashed near an airport about 80 miles from Pittsburgh. Now, earlier, ABC's Jim Huff witnessed the collapse of the World Trade Center's second tower.
As you can see behind me, The second and last tower of the World Trade Tower has just collapsed. It is about 10:30 Eastern Time, and the tower has collapsed. We did not hear an explosion. There was no sign telling us previous any kind of warning that the building was going to collapse. The warning for us were people just running in our direction, and that's when we started to get out of the way.
ABC's Jim Hoff. It is possible that all three planes involved in these attacks were hijacked. American Airlines confirms that at least one jetliner was an American Airlines flight, Flight 11, out of Boston to Los Angeles. All flights in the United States have been grounded. New York City under a state of terrorist alert. No way in or out. All bridges and tunnels closed. Larry Jacobs, ABC News.
America under attack. Our coverage continues from WABC Radio News. This is WABC, New York City.
Good morning. This is Babita Hariani in the WABC newsroom. You've been listening to live coverage from our ABC network. We have had an incredible number of things happen in the last 2.5 hours. Let me recap and update you as to what happened. If you're just joining us, here's kind of a timeline of what happened in the last 2.5 hours or so. We had a plane crash into the tower of the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan. That was about 8:50 this morning. Then we had a second plane crash into the second tower of the World Trade Center. That was just after 9 o'clock, about 9:03 a.m. President Bush at that time in Sarasota, Florida, he called the crash an apparent terrorist attack and a national tragedy. Then we had an aircraft crash near the Pentagon just outside of Washington, D.C. in Northern Virginia about an hour after the attacks in New York. Government buildings in Washington, including the Capitol, the White House, they're all evacuated with officials citing a credible threat of a terrorist attack. The FAA has shut down all aircraft takeoffs nationwide. The subways here in New York City service suspended. Train service, Metro North, Long Island Railroad, New Jersey Transit has been suspended. The Lincoln Holland tunnels, all the tunnels, in fact, in and out of Manhattan, completely shut down. The bridges shut down. We had then, shortly after 10 o'clock, a World Trade Center tower here in New York collapsed. That was about an hour after being hit by the plane. Then American Airlines says one of the planes that crashed into the Trade Center was an American Airlines Flight 11. That was hijacked after takeoff from Boston en route to Los Angeles. And we had a senior law enforcement official confirm that a car bomb exploded outside of the State Department in Washington, D.C. Now, the financial markets are completely closed. Primary elections have been suspended here in New York. Then we had the second tower of the World Trade Center completely collapsed. Both of those towers are completely gone. We're told that two of the planes, out of the three planes, two of the planes, American Airlines that were hijacked. One was a United Airlines flight. New York City in a complete state of terrorist alert. And now we're going to go back to ABC coverage, live coverage from our network. Let's join them now.
I'll tell you, I live in northern New Jersey, and on a high spot of land, actually, about 30 miles as the crow flies from the World Trade Center, and I can see it. And we stood on a berm and watched the smoke rise around it. And we didn't know that was one of the towers falling, the second of the two towers that fell. We didn't know that's what that was. But the collection of people around the metropolitan area that looked up and watched this tragedy unfold from a distance on a gloriously clear day, I would have to say millions of people had to have spotted this tragedy from afar because of the plume of smoke still exists now.
And as you say, Tim, it takes a very long time to evacuate those thousands of people from the buildings, and each of them collapsed in a matter of seconds.
They usually say, Jim, when they describe the World Trade Center, that they've got more telephone exchanges in there than the city of Detroit. That ought to tell you how many people work in that particular area, and that is a frightening thought.
Tim, how far away are you from the actual Trade Center disaster, and what can you see?
Well, Karen, you know New York City's a grid. I'm at 222nd Street and Broadway. You are, some 120 blocks closer to the World Trade Center than I am. This is as close as anyone can get a vehicle to Manhattan at the moment. There are roadblocks on all the commuter highways. There is traffic at all the spots where all the commuter highways are shut down. You can't get across bridges. There are matrix signs at the George Washington Bridge, for example, that say closed. But I'm looking at a scene reminiscent of, although a totally different type of story, when New York City had a commuter strike and people streamed across the Brooklyn Bridge. There is a bridge that goes across the Harlem and East River here that goes into Manhattan from where I'm standing now, and people are streaming on foot across. They've left their cars here, and they need to get in to Manhattan for some reason, and many of them think they're going to walk. I asked the police officer if the subways were running south, and he told me no. I don't know if there's truth to that, but that's an amazing situation in the nation's largest city to have it shut down like this, and there is noticeable shock on the faces of almost everyone walking around.
The city has virtually been shut down, as Tim says. That's ABC's Tim Sheld reporting live from Upper Manhattan, several miles away from where the Trade Center collapsed. He says that's about as close as anyone can get. The people who are closer and who were there because they were working when this attack occurred describe it as a war zone. One fire marshal, a gentleman by the name of Mike Smith, says everyone was screaming, crying, running, cops, people, firefighters, everyone. Another businessman said, I just saw the building I work in come down. And that, of course, is the World Trade Center, which had just collapsed in rubble behind him. Dust and dirt is everywhere, and it still is everywhere, covering nearly all of lower Manhattan. Ash is 2 to 3 inches deep in places. People are wandering around just dazed and terrified. It is a horrifying, horrifying picture. Karen?
And President Bush has called it both a terrorist attack and a national tragedy. Attacks on American landmarks with American Airlines airplanes. We have the 2 trade towers coming down. We have a plane flying into the Pentagon, which has been evacuated and is still burning at this hour. And we also have a report of a plane down, a large plane in western Pennsylvania, a 767. The FAA is also still trying to locate several planes that are missing and may be hijacked. Officials say it is too soon to speculate on who may have been behind this. Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat has denied responsibility, has condemned it, and has called it unbelievable, unbelievable, unbelievable. Jim?
The stories that people are now telling about what happened this morning are coming in. The eyewitnesses are telling us these horrifying stories. People, before the 2 buildings collapsed, jumping out of windows, falling to their deaths, trying to escape the burning plane and the smoke. One eyewitness, a gentleman by the name of Kenny Johanneman, tells us what he saw when he was there in the building. Do we have Kenny? Apparently we don't have Kenny Johanneman there. Kenny said that he was in the basement, apparently of the World Trade Center, when the building just came down and the elevator blew up. There was lots of smoke. He says, I dragged the guy out. His skin was hanging off, and I dragged him out, and I helped him to the ambulance. For many other people, unfortunately, there was to be no help because both buildings collapsed upon them.
And recapping what we've told you, we have America under attack. A terrorist attack is what President Bush is calling it. Both World Trade Center towers have collapsed. The scene in New York is one of disbelief. The smoke is now obscuring the entire skyline of Manhattan. All federal buildings in New York and Washington, D.C. are closed. There have been attacks in Washington as well. We had a report of the Pentagon being struck by a plane. The fire is still burning there. There was a report of a car bomb outside the State Department that has since been shot down. We also have we had a report that there was a bomb at the Capitol building, but that has since been shot down as well. Most of the federal buildings in Washington have been evacuated. The Treasury Department, the Capitol, even the White House, where reporters hurriedly were herded out of the building as a plane was circling overhead.
It's unclear who is responsible for these attacks, and that will become clear in the weeks and months ahead. But clearly, this was a coordinated attack. It happened in rapid-fire fashion. One plane and then another into the World Trade Center in New York, and then a third plane into the Pentagon in Washington, and then a fourth plane crashing. We believe it may be connected. We don't verify that yet, but crashing in Pennsylvania. This all happened very quickly, and the reports came in just as quickly.
As we are boarding Air Force One, they have bomb squads out here checking all of our gear a second time.
It's Linda Douglas on Capitol Hill. We've just been told that the Capitol is being evacuated and that all reporters must follow the...
America under attack. Our coverage continues from WABC Radio News. This is WABC, New York City.
big explosion. People started running. It was just chaos everywhere.
An eyewitness describing the scene at what used to be the World Trade Center towers in New York City in Lower Manhattan. Both towers hit by airplanes this morning. We know an American Airlines jet was hijacked and crashed into one of the towers. Then, incredibly, both 110-story towers collapsed. They crumbled, bodies falling from the buildings. American Airlines now says it lost 2 planes, around 160 people on board both those planes. They are gone. New York City is closed down. Then in Washington, another plane crashed into the Pentagon. Here's ABC's John McWethy.
This is one of those things that you dream of in your worst nightmares. It appears that a large jet aircraft, perhaps the size of a large passenger plane, came very low, clipping off light poles as it approached the Pentagon. It slammed into the side of the Pentagon, and it drove itself from the outer ring all the way to the inner ring. The area of the building that it went into burst into flames. There are many, many floors of destruction deep into the heart of the Pentagon.
ABC's John McWethy at the Pentagon. No casualty numbers yet, but they're sure to be very high. Another large plane has crashed in southeastern Pennsylvania. In Somerset County, apparently that may be a United jet which was hijacked out of Chicago. The FBI is now trying to determine who's responsible for today's attacks. All planes are grounded around the country. Doug Limerick, ABC News.
America under attack. Our coverage continues from WABC Radio News. This is WABC, New York City.
This is Bruce Anderson, WABC News. On the line with us now is Phil Zepeda. He's with the American Red Cross. Phil, can you fill us in on exactly what your folks are doing?
Sure. Right now, the American Red Cross is planning our strategy meetings. We have our chapters in New York City and in Washington, D.C., and around the country mobilizing to provide different types of assistance, and that assistance is disaster relief and biomedical assistance with blood donations.
Phil, do you have any numbers of people injured?
We don't yet. It's too preliminary for us as well. What we're looking to do is mobilize our volunteers, see who's able to help, and also look at our national blood inventory system of about 80,000 blood available units that are available to ship to different parts of the country.
So you need blood donors at this point,
We do need
obviously.
blood donors. Yes, we do. People can call 1-800-GIVE-LIFE to schedule an appointment near them.
Very good. That's Phil Zepeda. He's with the American Red Cross. Thank you very much, Phil. Let's update things just a bit here. We have apparently conflicting reports on that plane that went down near Pittsburgh. One report says it was United Airline plane from Chicago. Another report we have says it left Newark Airport en route west. We're not sure on that just yet. That plane down in Somerset County in Pennsylvania. Once again, a horrific series of attacks today on landmark buildings in Washington and New York. Terrorists apparently have crashed 2 planes into the World Trade Center. Both of the Twin Towers, each 110 stories tall, have collapsed. Incidentally, about 10,000 people work in each of those towers, and then another 5,000 people visit those towers during the course of a day. We don't have any casualty figures at this point. An explosion also rocked the Pentagon today. An aircraft crashed on a helicopter landing pad near the Pentagon. West Wing of the White House has been evacuated amid threats of terrorism there. Curtis?
And it almost reminds everyone back to February of 1993 when there was the first act of terrorism directed at the World Trade Center. That Ryder van that rolled into a parking lot there with 1,500 pounds of nitrate explosives took out 5 floors, rocked the foundation, close to half a dozen deaths, thousands of injuries. But the building was able to withstand that blast and stay tall. In this particular case, John Gambling, your observation was, in observing the second airplane as it crashed into the South Tower, that both towers collapsed almost within an hour and a half.
At least to me, and I'm not a construction expert, but it just seems to me that that was awfully rapid for it to just have been the result of the airplane crashes and the fire, though the fires were very intense, obviously fueled by the jet fuel that was on board both of those aircraft. I think the other thing, Curtis and Ron and Phil Boyce and Bruce, that we have to kind of understand here is that this is the first time in American history that our government has really gone into exile. I mean, our government at the moment is in control, and they're controlling things, and they're discussing everything, but they are in exile. We'll have more on that in a second.
John, George Weber is at the scene of the World Trade Center now. George, tell us on what you know at the moment.
Bruce, I've now moved a good ways east.
I guess out of sheer curiosity of this giant plume of white and black smoke and where it's heading and what's happening on the other side of town, because clearly they're not letting reporters anywhere close to the area where the two World Trade Towers collapsed. And they have basically closed off traffic all in downtown to allow emergency vehicles to come in. I mean, I'm seeing emergency vehicles from other states coming in here. This is, think about it. I mean, a massive rescue effort. So what they're doing right now, I'm standing right next to the Manhattan Bridge, and this is one of the entry points where they're bringing in the ambulances and the emergency personnel. And I can tell you, I can't tell you how many federal officials and federal vehicles have been moving into the city. And again, we still periodically will see some of the U.S. military aircraft doing flybys in downtown Manhattan, and I'm sure in other places around the tri-state region as well. And again, this is the sound that you hear hour after hour down here. And just below me is a park right at the edge of Chinatown. And while there's some curiosity among these people, they continue to play their card games. They continue to chat as if nothing is going on. The markets are open. They're shopping. They're buying their fish. It's as if this little corner of New York City was totally unaffected, but you know it's on the top of their minds. They're talking about it. They're pointing up in the air periodically, and they're continuing with their card games. So just a little snapshot of a piece of New York as they deal with this immense tragedy.
Thank you very much, George Weber. George, we understand that many of the injured were taken to St. Vincent's Hospital. That hospital is now full, but we do have a phone number for you to call if you're worried about a loved one that might have been injured. I assume that this phone number is going to be jammed with thousands of people who are concerned about their loved one. I'm going to give this number out now, 212-604-7285. Again, that is the emergency number that's been set up, the hospital number, 212-604-7285.
Yeah, and my guess is that throughout the course of the day, the best way to get this information out to the public is through the news media. And as long as the government officials involved are, providing this information in a somewhat timely fashion, at least to give people some kind of feeling that, okay, I have an idea that if I keep listening, they're going to tell me about my loved ones, because I quite frankly, I don't know how they're going to be able to handle, certainly at this early stage, Phil, the phone calls coming in from tens of thousands of people. I mean, I can imagine my mom's probably calling me. Everyone who has relatives of people who live in New York City are probably trying to call them right now. And I don't know if any of you have tried to make phone calls, whether it be on a landline or a cell phone. It's virtually impossible. Operators are swamped. It's very difficult to make direct phone calls. So this is a ripple effect across the country. It's causing near pandemonium, I think, in the minds of a lot of people.
Thank you very much, George. That's George Weber in Lower Manhattan at this hour. That number again, if you'd like information, trying to find information about people, 212-604-7285. We also have a confirmation now from United Airlines confirming flight from Newark to San Francisco. That's the plane that crashed near Pittsburgh. Steve Malsberg on the line. Steve has been talking to some people this morning. Steve, are you there?
Well, yeah, Bruce. Hi. I'm actually trapped here in New Jersey. I feel very helpless and with the rest of the nation, heartbroken and devastated. And if there was any way to get into the city, I would be there. But one thing I have managed to do is channel surf and pick up on some things that maybe with you guys being on the air constantly you weren't able to hear. And MSNBC did an interview with Lawrence Eagleburger, former Secretary of State, and he just said that this was a total intelligence breakdown, and that the magnitude of the attack, he considers this a total act of war, and that there hasn't been anything like this since Pearl Harbor. He considers the devastation, equates it to Pearl Harbor. And basically he said that only Osama bin Laden would have the capacity to coordinate this. He says an attack like this takes months or years to coordinate, and that's why he says there was a total breakdown in our intelligence. He also pointed out the obvious, that we had thought we had licked hijacking in this country, and apparently, at least, it appears on the surface that we have not licked hijackings, that there is a way, whether they had weapons or just rushed the cockpit, whatever they did, if they did that, it still remains a possibility here in the United States. So Lawrence Eagleberger said that George Bush needs to respond quickly, hard, and go after terrorism wherever we know terrorism exists, indicating even if we don't know for sure that they were the people directly responsible, we must go after those who would support Osama bin Laden and have in the past.
Well, so Lawrence Eagleberger advocated attacking who?
Well, he said our first target should be Osama bin Laden. He also talked about the Taliban and the Afghanistan, the government in Afghanistan. We have warned them, apparently, according to him, through our State Department and through Washington, that anything in the future that would occur, any kind of attack against American targets, they would be held responsible for if bin Laden was implicated or found to be responsible. And
well, don't you think, Steve, we would have attacked Osama bin Laden already if we knew where he was?
Well, that's what I was just going to bring up. It was several weeks ago, or maybe several months ago, the way time flies, that I remember saying on the air, Osama bin Laden was handing out promotional videotapes to the media. Osama bin Laden was interviewed by, I don't remember which network, but I mean,
so you're saying we know where he is?
Well, we have to know where he is.
Well, I don't think he's having a news conference today.
Not today. No, not today.
Well, I don't know where he is, and I don't know that he's responsible. And with all due respect to former Secretary of State Eagleberger, if this was a matter of 3 people coordinating hijacking of 3 planes, you don't need a huge infrastructure, and you don't need a lot of money. This was not a particularly high-tech terrorist attack, although obviously it was a very well-coordinated and very well-planned one, but you don't need 100, 200 people. You don't need a nation behind it.
Afghanistan has consistently given sanctuary to Osama bin Laden and his minions. They have been warned about this not just by the United States, but internationally, also by some of their fellow Muslim countries who also fear Osama bin Laden because of his radical fundamentalist ways. And if you're providing a base, a haven, a sanctuary for the terrorists who has targeted the United States and Israel, well, then you're just as culpable because you do nothing to sort of relieve yourself of that, exiling him.
Again, we've made a leap here that I don't think is justified in making yet, which is we've assigned blame to Osama bin Laden. Obviously, he's a number 1 suspect in any.
Well, I can bet you he's got a big smile on his face right now.
But either way, he's probably happy, but you can't kill a guy for being happy.
Although, actually, given the way I feel right now, you probably could. But hopefully tomorrow.
Well, now, and Ron, I mean, that's, and of course, you've always been one to preach caution. I mean, even in this case, I mean, you've got to be, heartbroken like everybody about this.
This is horrific. I mean, I live in this city. I have my family in this city. I was desperately worried about my family for hours. And I think we should find out who did this, find out how it was done, and figure out a mechanism to not just punish the people who did it, but a mechanism that completely roots out and extirpates the entire infrastructure.
But Eagleberger does have a good point in the fact that we thought we had hijacking under control, but if any of you have traveled in the last few months,
it's lax.
You know it's very, very lax. These people are busier in many cases talking to each other.
If we just want to do a quick historical review, which might be worthwhile, this problem began with the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, and the then Reagan administration viewed Afghanistan as sort of the Soviet version of Vietnam. And much of U.S. foreign policy was developed around the idea of encouraging Islamists such as Osama bin Laden and Sheikh Omar Abdel-Rahman to engage in war against the Soviets, bleed the Soviet economy, which eventually they did, drove the Soviets out. Unfortunately, this is what we call blowback.
Well, Ron, your attempt to kind of link the Reagan administration in some indirect capacity, or at least for setting the groundwork. The fact of the matter is, and if it turns out to be Osama bin Laden or the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, which is another report I heard they claimed responsibility, we have to realize one thing. A terrorist is a terrorist is a terrorist. And whether they're blowing up people in Northern Ireland or blowing up people in the West Bank or blowing up people in America, they are all terrorists. And when we condone
Steve,
it in one area,
Steve, I kind of got to interrupt you. We want to go to Joseph Lawless at Logan Airport, where a couple of the planes were hijacked.
They have had families flying on those flights that we've had various reports on to call these following numbers. American Airlines, 800-245-0999. Secondly, family members can call a Massport number, 617-568-3100. We've also urging people not to come to the airport at this point in time. We've increased the shuttle buses from the terminals to the MBTA Blue Line stop, and the MBTA has increased the frequency of subway transportation. We are in close communication with the FAA, the FBI, State Police, Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
You have been listening to Joseph Lawless, I believe, with the Port Authority in Boston.
Okay, thank you. We'll go back to our coverage here on WABC. I didn't want to interrupt Steve. He was getting wound up there, but I think we have to all kind of, again, keep in mind, we really don't know for sure what to do in a situation like this, and we're all emotional, and we all want to figure out something to do, but we can't.
Phil, these were domestic flights, not international flights. If you've taken both, you recognize the international flights have intense security as opposed to the domestic flights. Coming back from southern Florida yesterday, I was on a Delta flight. I had a detour into Washington, D.C., and you put your items through a metal detector, so to speak, a scanner. But the people who were there scanning the items may have well been just imported into the United States just months ago. It's not like they're experts in the field.
Curtis, casualty figures are now beginning to come in. New York City officials say as many as 165 bodies have been recovered following the dual crashes of planes into the World Trade Center this morning. And you can almost bet there will be more. And those two American Airlines planes that the gentleman was talking about moments ago, American Airlines says it lost two planes. One of the planes involved was Flight 11, a Boeing 767 from Boston to Los Angeles. That flight had 81 passengers, 9 flight attendants, 2 pilots on board. Also involved Flight 77, that was a Boeing 757 operating from Washington Dulles to Los Angeles, 58 passengers, 4 flight attendants, and 2 pilots. That's a total of 156 people killed there. And as we mentioned earlier, that United Airlines plane crashed in Somerset County in Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania, near Pittsburgh.
Do we know yet, Bruce, if that came from Newark? Because we heard conflicting reports.
Flight from Newark, New Jersey to San Francisco.
Right. That has been confirmed.
Okay.
That has been confirmed. I think that we all are sort of numb over this, as everybody is. And I think that we are going to see over the next coming weeks and months and possibly years a significant change in our view of ourselves. I think I'm struck mostly by the calm here in New York City and downtown, from what George Weber has described, what others have described.
I can tell you, I came into the subway. I was stuck in the subway for an hour. I left about 9:30 from my home at 86th Street and came downtown and got stuck at 37th coming to Penn Station, and it was surreal.
Right.
Nobody talking.
It's
when I got off, people were gathered around television sets, but nobody talking.
Yeah, there's a numbness that I feel not only here in our newsroom, but as you describe and as has been described on the streets of New York City. But as we've just heard in our roundtable here, there is an anger that is going to build up once this numbness wears off and the pain starts to really hurt. And it's going to be interesting to see how we as Americans really sort of react to this and what we ultimately do, because all of the questions that Ron has posed and Curtis has posed are the questions that are going to need to be answered.
I mean, let's look at Pearl Harbor, for example, which is not a bad analysis, although at least Pearl Harbor was directed at the military rather than specifically
World War.
We went to World War, and we interned thousands and thousands and thousands of perfectly loyal Japanese and Japanese Americans, even native-born Japanese Americans, out of fear,
Ron,
out of anger.
Ron, the next time you talk about profiling on airline flights coming in and how unfair it is, I'm going to remind you, if in fact these were hijacked by Arab extremists, how important profiling is. And subjects of that note are going to come up. But first, we're going to give you round-the-clock coverage of these terrible events here. And now, an update.
America under attack. Our coverage continues from WABC Radio News. This is WABC, New York City.
Terrorism against our nation will not stand. And now, if you join me in a moment of silence. May God bless the victims, their families, and America.
President Bush trying to comfort a nation shaken by an unthinkable series of terrorist events. It started this morning at New York's World Trade Center when 2 planes struck the Twin Towers of the center. American Airlines says 2 of its passenger jets involved, both apparently hijacked. The towers have since collapsed. Washington was also hit. A plane crashed into the Pentagon. sending people in the Capitol into panic.
The cordon of security around the White House has been pushed back drastically at this point, and people are running, scrambling over parked cars to get as far away as they can.
It's ABC's John Bascom in Washington. Near Pittsburgh, a jet has crashed. United Airlines says the flight was bound for San Francisco from Newark. The FAA has grounded all air traffic across the nation. Daria Aldinger, ABC News.
America under attack. Our coverage continues from WABC Radio News. This is WABC, New York City.
Bruce Anderson, WABC News. Once again, we do have a confirmation now. New York City officials say as many as 165 bodies have been recovered following those crashes of planes into the World Trade Center this morning. And the people on board those planes, a total of 156 people, American Airlines planes. Now we'll go to ABC and more continuous coverage.
100 people on board. There were no survivors.
The chaos and confusion continues both in New York and in Washington, D.C. At the Pentagon is still on fire. Correspondent John McWethy reported just a while ago that this is a major disaster at the Pentagon, that a major portion of the inner ring is destroyed, and it is his fear that several high-ranking Pentagon officials may be injured or killed in this attack. Washington is closed, basically, and as is New York. Both cities are in a lockdown mode, as Joe DeSteo just reported in his part of the country. ABC's John Bascom is in Washington, and he gives us an idea of what's happening in the nation's capital.
At first, people in the White House were told to get out of the building now, and they went across the street, most of them, to Lafayette Park. Then gradually, the security zone was widened. People were pushed back a block, then 2 blocks. Secret Service agents wearing flak jackets have cleared all of the streets around the White House now. Some are carrying machine guns, and about a dozen fire trucks have come close to the White House in case they're needed.
ABC's John Bascom reporting from Washington. You're listening to live coverage of this attack on the United States. Live coverage from ABC News continues now with ABC's Peter Jennings.
Than he is in the White House. Is that the conventional wisdom among the current White House press corps?
You mean...
That the president wants to be in the safest place, he's in the White House, unless he's in a bunker somewhere.
Well, I think that is normally true, but again, in a situation like this where it's obvious that they're just not sure what's going to happen, they believe there are safer places for him. The Secret Service told us absolutely they have places they believe are safer for their protectees than the White House. Remember, we talked about this earlier, but just a couple of years ago, a plane landed on the White House lawn.
Right.
So mistakes do happen in terms of the protection of the president, and they don't want to take any chances at this point.
Thanks very much, Claire. But one more question. We try to track the political leadership in the city generally, and I realize this is in large measure a serious effort, but also something of an academic exercise. Where are the leaders of the Senate and the House at the moment?
We're going to interrupt Peter Jennings and Claire Shippen right now and go to Boston's Logan Airport for a news conference and a briefing on those airplanes that were apparently
I'm not
hijacked.
sure the exact time. You are correct in saying that the airport does.
Joseph Lawless, the spokesman at the airport in Boston.
It's handed off to different control centers. I don't know the time. I don't know the time on that.
Have all the other flights from Logan been accounted for at this point?
To my knowledge, I can't confirm that. Again, I think I said that the FAA is working on that. The FAA is trying to track that down.
Do you know how many flights took off before 9:15 this morning?
I don't have that number. I don't have that number.
On an average morning?
It would be pure speculation. I don't want to speculate right now.
Sir, do air traffic controllers monitor a departing flight to see if it's on the tap that it, I assume, filed?
I would assume so. I don't know what their specific responsibilities are or their procedures are.
And if it's not, what is the procedure?
I don't. Again, that's the FAA. I don't have any responsibility or knowledge of what they do.
So has the entire airport been evacuated, or is it in the process of being evacuated?
The airport is not evacuated. We've shut down the security checkpoints, and we've taken people beyond the security screening back out into the non-secure side, and those remain shut.
How far after a plane takes off here does the National FAA control tower take over the flight?
That's an area of the FAA. I don't know what their procedures are in going from zone to zone.
Joe, how concerned are you?
I'm very concerned. This is a tragic event. I'm very concerned about this.
You think it's stay would ever come?
No.
Hey, thank you very much. That's all the information we have right now, and I apologize there's not more information.
Just one question, Joe. Is there any kind of video monitoring system which records passengers as they proceed to the top floor area?
I can't discuss any of the security things we have in place.
Find out what's going to happen over at the client as of 1:30. We should have more
Spokesman Joseph Lawless at Boston's Logan Airport briefing reporters on Boston's involvement in these tragic events this morning. At least two of the planes that we know of were hijacked from Boston. Karen, perhaps you could bring us up on that.
Actually, one of the planes that was hijacked from Boston is believed to be one of the planes that was flown into the World Trade Center tower, the first one that was hit, the first one to collapse. Both of them have gone down. Both the World Trade Center towers in New York City have crumbled to the ground, changing the landscape of Manhattan forever. Another plane has crashed into the Pentagon, which is still burning at this hour. People going back to the World Trade Center for a moment, we have a quote of an eyewitness who said, "I heard a boom. People were jumping off the building everywhere. They were just jumping. These buildings were 110 stories high before they were toppled." We have Chris Yates, an aviation expert at Jane's Transport Magazine, saying this is perhaps the most audacious terrorist attack that has ever taken place in the world. It takes a logistics operation from the terror group involved that is second to none. And he or she adds only a very small handful of terror groups is on that list. We have flights from the U.S. locked down.
The lockdown continues. I guess we can say it's a lockdown. It's a shutdown. Manhattan is virtually shut down.
Washington.
And Washington is virtually shut down. The tunnels and bridges leading in and out of Manhattan, at least to the west side, to New Jersey, across the Hudson River, are closed. The White House, the Capitol, the State Department, the Pentagon were all evacuated. And there's a bit of a lockdown around the country. Not a bit. There's a great lockdown because the FAA has ordered all airports shut down this morning, and all planes that were in flight were ordered to land at the nearest airport. And we just heard Joseph Lawless a moment ago briefing reporters, and he also said that things are shut down at Logan.
We've increased our security measures. We've shut down all the construction sites within Logan Airport, both airside and landside. And we've shut down all security checkpoints and removed all passengers who had been previously screened out into the non-secure part of the airport.
Here in New York, Mayor Rudolph Giuliani could not speculate on exactly how many lives had been lost. However, he would say a tremendous number of lives had been lost. There was a stampede of all avenues on the west side, Reuters reported, when two of the towers came crumbling down. Witnesses say people were hysterical, saying we're going to die. A huge cloud of smoke and dust came up the avenue, looking like it was going to engulf everyone.
As we said, both President Bush and Secretary of State Powell were out of Washington when this occurred. Both are heading back to the nation's capital. The president coming back from Florida, Secretary of State Powell coming back from Lima, Peru. He cut short his what would have been, or what was, his first official visit to South America to return home to deal with this crisis. But before leaving, he urged foreign ministers from the OAS, the Organization of American States, to quickly pass a democracy pact, an agreement, as a clear message against terrorism, and it was adopted unanimously before he left. And then Powell left the military airport in Lima to head back to Washington, saying that this is a terrible, terrible tragedy. A terrible tragedy has befallen his nation, but it is befallen, said Secretary Powell, to all those who believe in democracy.
And, of course, this is affecting the entire nation, Jim, coast to coast. Evacuations have been ordered at the UN in New York, the Sears Tower in Chicago, and, of course, Seattle Space Needle is shut down for the day. There are also lockdowns at military bases and, of course, extra guards at our nuclear supplies and at our germ warfare sites across the country.
And we know that this is affecting people around the world. As we said a few moments ago, many of the foreign exchange banks and money lenders were in the world.
America under attack. Our coverage continues from WABC Radio News. This is WABC, New York City. This is WABC New York and 1050 ESPN New York, WEBD, New York.
From ABC News, I'm Doug Limerick.
As soon as he got hit, I was thrown to a window. So I was very lucky to get out. There's a lot of people that didn't get out. There's a lot of people coming down the stairs burnt up.
Today will go down in history as one of America's darkest days. Horrible disasters in New York City and Washington. Terrorist attacks. Planes crashing into New York's World Trade Center towers, which have collapsed, crumbled. Then another plane crashed into the Pentagon, and another jet has crashed in western Pennsylvania. Let's go live to ABC's Bill Greenwood in Washington. Bill.
Doug, both planes that hit the World Trade Center apparently were American airline jets. Flight 11 from Boston to Los Angeles, and Flight 77 apparently hijacked from Washington Dulles to Los Angeles. Minutes after the crashes, shortly after 10 a.m., the first World Trade Tower collapsed. 28 minutes later, the second tower went down. Police sealed off much of lower Manhattan. Mayor Rudolph Giuliani said the loss of life will be horrific. About the same time, here in Washington, an aircraft crashed into the west side of the Pentagon. All major federal buildings, museums, and monuments were closed, and heavily armed police were deployed around major government buildings, including the White House and Capitol. All federal workers have been sent home, and the FAA has banned all takeoffs from U.S. airports. The joint congressional leadership has been moved to a safe, secret location, and several congressmen are calling this the worst act of aggression since Pearl Harbor. Doug?
Thanks, Bill. Security tightened around the country. ABC's John Bascom on the streets of the nation's capital. John.
Doug, the Secret Service wearing flak jackets has cleared the streets for 2 and 3 blocks around the White House. Some of them are carrying machine guns. The only sound you can hear now in downtown Washington near the White House is that of a